Good evening, everybody. It's August 10th, 2020. This is the East Lyme Inland Wetlands Agency meeting. It is 7:04 p.m. We have the continuation of our public hearing regarding the revision to our wetlands regulations. I'm Gary Upton. In attendance, we have our Vice Chair, Kristen Chantrell, our Secretary, Phyllis, I almost said Phyllis iPad, Phyllis Berger. We have one of our alternates, Mr. Diebel, is here. We've got town staff, Gary Gaishel, Sue Spang, and Jen Lindo. We have Mr. Koch, Ted Koch, a regular seated member, Miss Rosemary Ostfeld. And we have Mr. Schmidt, Mr. David Schmidt, regular seated member, and Dom Phimister, a regular seated member. Doreen Ryan. Have you been seated for the past things on this, Doreen? Yes, so we'll continue. So for the record, Doreen will be seated with the agency as an alternate. And
Gary?
Again,
Gary?
Sorry, go ahead.
Who is she seated for? Is there somebody missing as far as your regular members?
No.
We have, no. So we've had her a few times. She's been through, has everyone been here each time she's been seated as an alternate?
Mm-hmm.
Technically, our bylaws don't say it can't be any more than 7. So, I mean, let's keep doing what we're doing, I guess. The more, the merrier.
You have 7 now, without
Yeah.
the alternate. Yeah.
Okay. I'm saying it doesn't say it can't be more than 7. I mean, we could ask Mr. Zamarka. Is it okay that the alternate continues to be seated, Mr. Zamarka? He's muted.
He can.
The commission is a 7-member body. It should remain a 7-member body.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep it that way then. Doreen, thanks for hanging out. We appreciate you hanging out, just like Mr. Jason Diebel. I commend you guys because, of course, I would do the same, but I might not. I might go and just relax, you know. You guys are awesome. So here we are. We're continuing the public hearing. I'd like to make sure we, try and keep things orderly. I know that Dr. Fye needs to split at 10:30, and I'd like to split at 7:30. No, joke. So let's keep things moving along here this evening. Where did we leave off? Let's have our fun discussion continued.
Oh,
I think it was what, 1 a.m. when we left off last time, guys?
I think it was closer to 11, wasn't it? Oh, no, 11:45.
what is that?
Public hearing is still open, and yeah, here we go again.
I guess we should start by saying, Jen Lindo, do you have any, and I guess members of the public that might be here in participation, if you could use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Thank you for everyone bearing with myself and the rest of the team trying to do this digitally. It is quite a pain in the ass. But if someone of the public has something to comment or say, now would be the time where we'd want to hear what you have to say. I think we should continue in that nature until the public's spoken, and then we can, as a commission, discuss and enter any of these things we've shipped over to Jen today. Sorry, Jen, to bury you with like 97 things.
I think the first thing what you should probably do is enter the exhibits that came in from the public between the last public hearing and this public hearing. Because there are items triple H through triple P that were letters from the public commenting who couldn't attend this evening.
Yes.
And then I can click on each person who's currently waiting to talk.
Sounds good, Jen.
If you want to just read through that list real quick. I don't know if you actually want to see the letters, but they've been on the website, so.
Yeah, they are posted to the website. Sorry. Materials. If you go to East Lyme Town Hall Inland Wetlands Agency and you go to regular meeting of August 10th, you can navigate yourself, anyone out there, to these materials. Why am I not? There we go. So which ones are the new ones, Jen?
HHH, starting with Deborah Deal's letter, all the way through PPP.
Okay, so Q and R and all those ones aren't new.
No.
All right. So HHH, Deb Deal. So Deb Deal, if I may, if anyone wants to pull this up and disagree, but, how do we feel about me paraphrasing you guys want me to read it all in word for word?
Mr. Chairman, I
Yes.
do believe last time the exhibits were read in full for the people who were unable to attend, so you should do the same this time.
All right. That's why I have a 6-pack of Polar Seltzer water to keep the whistle wet. All right. If anyone else feels like reading, they can.
Yeah, please read word for word, though. I think that's important that people's opinions
This
are
is
summarized.
Exhibit Triple H. Thanks for hosting the very informative meeting yesterday, albeit very long. I vote to increase the upland review to 500 feet. It's absurd to think we need scientific evidence to support the fact that less development means cleaner water, not to mention saving wildlife. The vote shouldn't center on how much work it will be for the town to make these changes. This is for the good of the community. Also, Gary Gaishel's comments in the day were an abomination as he clearly supports more development, i.e. more money. Does this sway the board unfairly? I think so. Thanks for listening. Best, Deborah Deal, 26 Green Valley Lakes Road. I work at Yale New Haven Hospital and run the WIC program since apparently you want to know such things. Thanks, Deb.
Mr. Upton?
Yes,
This
sir.
is Paul Daigle. I would recommend that you don't refer to what people do unless it's pertinent to their testimony. People's name and address is what's required to be read into the record in their statement. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Again, I only read that because she wrote it in a letter and I didn't want to omit anything by my choice. Exhibit Triple I, C. Hayes letter. Christy Hayes, Wednesday, July 15th, 2020 to Gary Gaishel. I was not able to join in the Zoom meeting, but wanted to let you know that I am definitely in favor of the extended area in order that we can increase our protection of wetland areas. Our current and future environmental health depends on rulings such as this, and I consider it very important. Sincerely, Christine Hayes, 97 West Main Street, Niantic. That's the entirety of the email. That's Exhibit Triple I. Exhibit JJJ. This is from Thomas Moriarty, Wednesday, July 15th, 1:25 p.m. Mr. Gaishel, Upland Review change. It is my opinion that the proposed expansion of Upland Review requirement is excessive. Thomas Moriarty, 31 Manwaring Road, Niantic, Connecticut, 06357. And let's not read the phone number, I guess. Exhibit KKK, J. Parker letter. Mr. Gaishel is emailed at 10:44 on July 20th from John C. Parker. I do not support expanding the upland review area. Changing a regulation when scientific findings show the need would be fine. Changing the scope of an existing regulation as a way to stop commercial development is not appropriate. I support following the guidance of professionals. I do not support recommendations based only on, quote, that would be nice, end quote. John C. Parker, Niantic, Connecticut. I don't see his full address. That is all that is in the email. Exhibit Triple L from our very own T. Koch, public comment.
Should I read this one?
I was just going to ask. Go for it, Mr. Thank you.
All right. I said, dear Ms. Lindo, would you kindly add my comments below to the public record in advance of our next wetlands meeting? Thank you. I've heard the public comment about the proposed increase of our upland review area from 100 feet to 500 feet. The public clearly supports some increase. Support for an increase specifically to 500 feet is less clear. Some have asked what the scientific support is for an upland review area of 500 feet as opposed to 200 feet or 1,000. This is a valid concern. I am not aware of much evidence in our record as it presently stands, specifically supporting 500 feet as the appropriate measure. I am concerned that if our board were to approve a 500-foot upland review area on the record as it stands, we could be vulnerable to the charge that our decision is arbitrary and capricious. I'm also concerned that we should notice the public while public comment is still open, specifically of any intent we might have to increase the upland review area to a distance between 100 and 500 feet. I have been reviewing the wetlands regulations of our sister towns. Lyme, for example, extends its 100-foot upland review area by different measures depending upon different activities and around certain named vulnerable wetlands and watercourses. The time for public comment gladly remains open. I propose the following. 1, the board should consider, and the public should know that we will consider, expanding our upland review area only in certain areas. The Patagonia watershed comes to mind. It impacts our town aquifer and the Long Island Sound. I request that our town planner, Mr. Gaishel, or another appropriately designated person present to the board a complete list of such particularly vulnerable wetlands and watercourses. 2, the board should consider, and the public should know that we will consider, different upland review area measurements of less than 500 feet, both as a general proposition for the entire town and or as a specific proposition for particularly vulnerable wetlands and watercourses. This way, we can balance our task to protect the wetlands and watercourses with our ability rigorously to enforce such regulations and to understand where good environmental protection meets the law of diminishing returns.
Thank you, Mr. Koch. All right. Exhibit M, is that all right? Am I good, Mr. You're good? Sorry. Exhibit triple M from B. David. This is a letter. Loading. B. Davilda at an email address to Mr. Gaishel, to the Inland Wetland Agency, and Chairman Gary Upton. I am unable to attend the continued hearing on August 10th, so I'm sending this email. I live in Lyme, but care greatly about the environment and how each town's decision affects its neighbors. I have just, quote, retired from Lyme's Open Space Commission after about 8 years on it. You are certainly doing the right thing, having hearings, maybe several, to hear your constituents and consider all sides. The ultimate goal here is, of course, to protect your town's drinking water and the environment. I agree that the town needs to look carefully at the location of its crucial water bodies and protect them first. Yes, strict regulations puts a burden on the town, but good regulations should strike a balance. I suggest that you take the time to do careful research and use good, up-to-date data. Use your plan of conservation and development. If it has not been updated within the last 10 years, then update it, exclamation point. Think long-term. Poor regulations can cause problems way into the future, which are expensive, if not impossible to correct. The town of Lyme makes it very hard to develop or build anything. Over 50% of our town is open space. Our water is very clean and it is a desirable place to live. We have strict wetland zoning and our sanitarian is tough. May I suggest a compromise? Maybe not every house can have a pool. Maybe in some cases decks could be exempt. They don't cause as much harm to the environment in general. Maybe the setback could be changed to 250 feet now and then another 250 feet at a later date. Going from 100 to 500 all at once seems harsh. Sustainable, long-term, carefully thought out regulations that are fair and balanced and will be enforceable are the best. I wish you a good end result. Barbara David, 34 Joshua Town Road, Lyme, Connecticut, 06371. That was Exhibit MMM. Exhibit NNN is from B. Fusari. It starts simply with the date, July 29th, 2020. East Lyme Inland Wetlands Commission. Chairman Upton and commission members, I'm writing this letter opposing your change to the regulated area from 100 feet to 500 feet. Has the commission determined that developments that have been built under the current regulations are causing an impact to the wetlands? And if so, where's the data? Has the commission determined how the roads without any drainage control has an impact on the wetlands compared to the roads that have drainage controls like detention basins or water quality control basins? If the commission hasn't looked into it, then how do you know your current regulations need to be changed? Changing the regulations without determining where the problem is will do nothing to improve the wetlands or quality of the water. There are a lot of roads in town that their drainage goes directly into the wetlands. So in the winter, they're de-icing the roads. All the chemicals they put down goes into the wetlands, which increases the sodium in the water. Changing the regulation will not improve this. This change to the regulation puts an impact on most of the town with no evidence showing how it will improve the quality of the wetlands and the water in town. I'm a second generation developer that's been in the business for over 30 years, and we built 2 developments in town, Spinnaker and Sea Spray. I'm also the developer of Twin Valley Lakes, and as a developer, we are not looking to build developments that will have an impact on wetlands. We build them as the regulations that as to the regulations that the state and towns have adopted. If the commission wants to change the regulation, then they should do some homework and find out where the problem is first and how best to repair it, and not assume that changing from 100 feet to 500 feet, a 500% increase, will improve anything. With an impact this large, that will affect most landowners in East Lyme. The town should wait until you can hold a public meeting in person. I've heard no reason as to why this has to happen now. Sincerely, Robert Fusari Jr., Liberty Way Partners, LLC, owner of 22 Liberty Way. Exhibit 000, Bialawans and Marco letter. Exhibit August 5th, Gary Upton, Chairman, Inland Wetlands Agency, Gary Gaishel, Jennifer Lindo, Wetlands Officer, Administrative Assistant. My name is John Bialawans, Jr. of 61 Walnut Hill Road. I would ask that this letter be included in the exhibits for the upland hearing on upland review. We're in opposition to the increase of the upland review area from 100 feet to 500 feet. We feel that is neither legal nor factually supported. This town already has the most restricted regulations in all of its boards, commissions, and departments. What we need is to enforce the regulations that there are now. Look at a Al Smith property. The permit was given to Al Smith, not past construction. It's been over a year for this dispute to be settled. How much more money and time is the town going to spend? 2 construction companies sharing 1 permit. Is that allowed? Especially keep the politics out and favors that have been done in this town. I'm repeating what citizens of East Lyme have been saying about long-standing problems in this town. I will share some examples. 1, Stop and Shop with gas station in town's aquifer. 2, Costco with gas station in town's aquifer. 3, huge gateway development built above the town's aquifer. What about the pipe breakage fitting damage to the wetlands? Gordon Pond and the town's aquifer. At that time, the Wetland Agency and the CT Deep enforced their regulations, laws, and see how fast the restoration cleanup went, and Gateway did everything that was asked of them, with no excuses on the repairs and cleanup. My last example is a solar farm on Grassy Hill and Walnut Hill Roads, where were all the concerned citizens of East Lyme for the disaster on wetlands, property, water courses, Cranberry Meadow Brook, Latimer's Brook, and the Sound at Golden Spur when they had a retention pond failure. Even the solar farm's own wetlands, water courses are still damaged, never vacuum the silt up, rock dams never done, and the list goes on. Did anyone clean up or look at a low estimate of 900 tons of silt down these water courses and into the Sound? Where did CT Deep and Town of East Lyme Wetland Agency did the CT Deep and Town of East Lyme Wetlands Agency fully execute their regulations and laws on this matter? East Lyme would never have another solar farm built here, I would imagine, from lessons learned. Look at the CT Deep on solar farms now. I guess they learned something from their oversight, and the town too. What I have heard and been told by CT citizens and East Lyme citizens that a major influence to this project was money, politics, and favor. I would like to know if the town located all the water courses, wetlands, vernal pools, etc. I would like to know if the town located all the water courses, wetlands, vernal pools, etc. that will affect all the citizens of East Lyme with this regulation change. Is this going to be another expense for landowners to live in this town? I would like to know if the Wetlands Commission members have driven around town roads to see the wetlands, etc., and see the problems with this change to homeowners. Homeowners wouldn't be able to do anything. That could be a total of 1,000 feet - 500 feet on either side of wetlands, etc. Do you know how much time, money, and lawsuits that will happen with this regulation change? Did anyone think about the staff at the town hall? It's going to end up hiring more people like other wetlands agent, administrative assistants to planning, zoning, building departments, and other town hall departments if needed. How much more will the taxpayers have to pay? What's going to happen? People will move out. Citizens will say, what can I do on my own property? Can I fix anything from septic systems, additions, a new home, or even a little shed, etc.? Of course, our taxes will go up to pay for the lawsuits, staff hours, and etc. This is not a quaint little town anymore, and it will never be again. Like I said, and other people too, keep money, politics, and favors out of the process. We already had a lot of that happen in this town, past, present, and we hope not in the future. John Bialowans Jr. and Carol Morco, if I'm saying it correctly. I apologize if I'm not. And it appears there's another letter from the same sender. Let me open it. Jen, this is the second letter. It looks like a continuation. Am I reading?
Yeah, he submitted one letter one day and he submitted the second letter the next day.
All right, this one's just not marked when you go into it. So this is PPP, and this is the last new piece, right?
It's the last new public comment piece before the stuff that came from all of you. Yes.
From the same person to the same people, Mr. John Bialowans, August 6, 2020. My name is John Bialowans of 61 Walnut Hill Road. I got up around 3 a.m. Thursday morning and did a little more thinking and research on what I said in my letter of August 5th. I remembered that the town hired a Massachusetts firm to locate and drill test holes in the aquifer. They ultimately moved the primary secondary boundaries of the aquifer. This happened probably more than 5 years ago. Everyone knows that big chain stores, Costco, others, put their scouts feelers out to find a location for their stores. It could be years before they pick a location. Rumors were going around that Costco said, and I quote, "If Costco cannot have a gas station, East Lyme is not their choice for a store." I went to some of those Wetlands meetings and listened to the engineers speak, and I'll stop here. All the gas stations were there in the 50s and 60s, maybe earlier, on Flanders and Chesterfield Road. I worked at Perry's Esso gas station when I was in high school. I even bought one of the brothers' Corvettes when I was 18. I had the vet for a while until I got my insurance estimate. That ended my ownership. The brother took it back, luckily. Stop and Shop gas station was built on the secondary line of the aquifer. A lot of citizens of East Lyme thought the aquifer line was from the high school down past the middle school, along Flanders Road, and to the hillside on Gateway property. I would like to say something more about the solar farm issue. I know the Wetlands Commission is going to say that they issued a cease, desist, and restore order on the property. If you read the regulations, laws authority of the East Lyme Wetlands Commission, then DEEP got involved. Look at the CDR order, what was done. The only thing they said was that it was a civil matter and they did what they could. Like I heard, and I have been told by CT citizens and East Lyme citizens, that a major influence to this project was money, politics, and favors. Thank you, John Bialowans Jr., Carol Morco. P.S. At least at almost 72 years old, I can still admit to my mistakes that I have said and correct them. Thank you, sir. And shall we, does everyone need a navigation of, do we like a navigation of the rest of the articles that have been submitted?
Did you want to let the public comment first? There's only a handful of people in here.
Sure, so I'm at, let me just make a note. I'm at QQQ, exhibit QQQ.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, let's get the comment from the public.
Okay. I'm going to go to Bob Fanner first. Bob, I don't know if you had a comment you wanted to make. You have to unmute yourself if you do.
I don't have anything to add at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Just listening.
I'm going to go to Rich and Kate Steele. Did you have a comment you wanted to make?
No, we do not.
Okay, thank you. Then I have a Brendan Crowley. Brendan, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
No, I don't. Thank you.
You're welcome. I have Robert's iPhone. Nope. Okay. Mr. Beeman, did you have a comment that you wanted to make? I'm gonna guess nope. And Mary, since you're there, I'm gonna give you the opportunity to comment.
Oh, no, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Harvey Beeman is unmuted again, so maybe he
Yeah.
did have.
Harvey, did you have a comment that you wanted to make?
No, there was nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. That's everybody, Gary. So if you want to go ahead and move on to the,
Does Cheryl have a comment? I see Cheryl there
oh,
too.
yep, hold on.
Hi, I don't have any comment right now. I did make my comments at the last meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for catching that, Rosemary. I think that's everybody.
All right.
So Chairman Upton, back to you.
All right, for some more bedtime reading for everybody. Let's see here. We were on Exhibit QQQ. This is a response to research request for aquifer protection upland review areas. This was a request made by yours truly, and it came to my attention today that I didn't know we. It seems the question wasn't posed specifically for some reason. Anyway, my first request was denied. So entering this into the record, Jennifer Lindo, we may want to add this to the IWA public hearing record. I don't think it's relevant, so I'm thinking no, Upton may want it. Is that from you, Jen, or from Gary?
Gary sent it to me so that I would have it, so that if you wanted to enter it, I could have I had the document.
Okay.
So until he heard from you, he didn't want to enter it as an exhibit. And then you sent it to me as an exhibit, but I already had it entered as the original one. So that was.
So just to clarify, I asked for information from the CCM I wanted to know which towns in our state of Connecticut had aquifer drinking water, and of those towns, what their upland review areas were. Basically, that was the question. So from Mark Nickerson to Gary Upton, Mr. Gaishel, research is back from CCM. Enjoy. August 3rd, the Honorable Mark Nickerson, First Selectman, Town of East Lyme, address. Dear Mark, the following is in response to your request for information regarding what towns in the state have aquifer drinking water. For those towns that do, what are upland review areas or other protections for the wetlands in those towns? There we go. The phrase towns that have aquifer drinking water can mean different things, some of which lead to deep and others to deep pH. Deep has the Aquifer Protection Area Program, and if the focus is on which towns have aquifer protection areas that are regulated, that program, you want to go here. You can see a map of them at insert address. If the question focuses on which towns have people or businesses that use water from aquifers, you'll be better off checking with DPH. Its drinking water section regulates public water companies, which include systems at the scale of the MDC all the way down to a Dunkin' Donuts served by its own well. But many systems like New Haven's Regional Water Authority, even with all those big reservoirs, also have wells tapping into an aquifer. Somewhere DPH also has a private well program. Few of CT's private wells tap into the kind of aquifer regulated by DEEP's APA program, but every well that yields water is producing it from some kind of aquifer. The local and regional health districts do the heavy lifting in dealing with those. I've attached several documents that help explain the program for municipalities, model regulation, how to develop your own regulation, and fact sheet concerning drinking water sources in Connecticut. Also, each website link includes contact information with DEEP and DPH if you have further questions. At the DEEP website, there is a program manual specific to municipalities. It is too large to attach here, but you can download straight from the website. I hope this information is helpful. Please feel free to contact me directly at his phone number or by email at his email. Should you have any further questions, best Brian West. And then there's his attachments that he cites, and there's a lot of pages, and I'm not going to read them. Looks like many, many pages. Exhibit RRR, Wetlands meetings of 2019 with the discussion of regulations. These are just being entered in to the record. I think one of our members had kindly done some hard work.
Thank you, Doreen.
Thank you, Doreen. and basically found all the discussion in 2019 about this. Anyone jump in if I'm wrong, but we had debated how much this had been spoken about. We wanted to enter into the record from 2019 and 2020, how many times we generally discussed the regulations as evidenced, I believe, to the concept of carrying on with what we were doing. Does that make sense? Exhibit SSS, Water Quality Reports, 2007, 2010, 2013, all the way to 2019. These, I believe, are taken directly as PDFs from our own town website.
Correct.
And if you go through, it's a lot of interesting stuff. I recommend that you know how to read these, because I remember going to one of the water sewer commissions and learning how they were interpreting all this stuff. So those are all attached there as something for the record. Exhibit TT.
Wait,
Sure.
Yep. I just noticed somebody from the public entered, Henry Amder.
Yep.
Yeah, and sorry, I can't see you guys because I'm actually
That's
doing.
fine. I know you're probably reading the screens. So
Yep, right.
I just wanted to flag that up. So if anybody wants to.
So
Henry,
who-
Henry Amder, I noticed that he entered the meeting. Henry, we're just taking public comment for the public hearing. If you would like to say something, you're welcome to.
Yeah, Jen, you want to unmute him?
He has himself muted.
Okay. My name is Henry Amder. I'm president of the Old Black Point Beach Association. We're over 100 residents and homeowners in the town of East Lyme. I just want to go on record as being strongly opposed to the increase of the regulation of inland water to 500 feet from 100 feet. This would actually encompass the entire community, and myself, I'm probably 2 blocks and 4 properties away from any inland water or inland wetland, and yet would be controlled and have to approach the committee for any work done on my property. This is highly objectionable to the 60 proprietary and over 100 East Lyme residents that are part of our association. I speak on behalf of the association and as a homeowner here at 275 Old Black Point Road.
Thank you, Henry. I was just about to ask you for your address.
Yes. I'm also president of the Old Black Point Beach Association, which has over 60 homeowners as proprietary members and an additional 40 or 50 East Lyme residents who are part of our association.
Noted. I don't believe we can take your comment on their behalf, but we hear that you are the president of such. Mr. Zick can comment on, unless we had written comment from them.
All right. Well, I did get the approval of the executive board of my association this evening to speak on their behalf. And certainly we would, if this is passed, we would pursue any legal options or remedies should this, pass.
And at this time, we are just hearing your statements, and I believe the commission and I will try to comment. We're making notes, and we'll try to comment a little bit after the public
please do.
Done speaking. And if check our previous meeting, because we do also talk about some of the stuff you brought up. I'd recommend. I mean, it's very long and boring, but being it as important as it is to you and all of those people, I think it would behoove at least someone or a few of you guys to see what we previously said also.
Okay, but I can tell you, I live 2 blocks from wetlands, but within 500 feet of wetlands, inland wetlands. I live 75 feet from the ocean, and there's 4 property owners and at least 1 town road in between me and any wetlands. So it is extremely unlikely that anything I could do out here would impact any inland wetlands with all that intervening property and town roads in between. And this is the kind of issue that we have here in Old Black Point, where we have a core of inland wetlands, which we have vehemently, we've actually purchased and tried to protect. We're very sensitive to trying to maintain a ecologically sensitive neighborhood here. We bought up open space here at our own expense and tried to protect that over the years at our own expense. But extending that to 500 feet would impact an awful lot of the work being done on our properties out here. I just don't understand how that would benefit protection of our wetlands. Am I still here?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're just listening.
Okay. I just don't understand. We are very sensitive to trying to preserve an environment out here that is ecologically sensitive and respects open space. Many of our members have actually bought up properties to maintain open space here. I can tell you that during the summer or year round, we have hundreds of people on a daily basis coming in to appreciate a unique property here. So I just don't understand why extending that regulation out to 500 feet would in any way, benefit that protection. Maybe you can explain that to me later on in the meeting.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else, Jen, while we've kind of hit pause on putting the exhibits in?
Nope.
All right. Let me see here.
I believe I've submitted the next set of exhibits, so
Yeah.
I have something that I'm happy to say.
That's
next.
RRR, Rosemary?
Yeah, there's a handful of them, so yeah, I'm happy to just.
Yeah, go for it, please.
Okay, sure. So water is absolutely essential for the existence of life on Earth, and it's a shared resource, and it is finite. And according to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which oversees water resource management, only approximately 3% of the Earth's water is fresh water. 2.5% of that 3% is unavailable. It's locked up in glaciers,
Rosemary,
polar ice caps.
could you point me to which exhibit you're reading from?
I'm going to just read what I'm going to say, and then I'm going to add all the exhibits in.
Understood. Okay, so you're giving us kind of a thing, and then you're going to say, this is what I have for exhibit.
And then I'm going to say,
got it.
please add these.
I was trying to follow along, and I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm not there. Where is she? So yeah, go.
That's
Sorry, I
fine. I'll
apologize.
start again. All right, so water is absolutely essential for the existence of life on Earth. It's a shared resource, and it is finite. According to the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which oversees water resource management, only approximately 3% of the Earth's water is fresh water. 2.5% of that is unavailable, locked up in glaciers, polar ice caps, atmosphere, and soil, highly polluted, or lies too far under the Earth's surface to be extracted at an affordable cost. So that leaves only approximately 0.5% of the water on Earth as available fresh water, and includes all lakes, rivers, streams, and groundwater that is easily accessible. So it's important to note that our freshwater resources, including our wetlands and groundwater, are interconnected. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, traditionally management of water resources has focused on surface water or groundwater as if they were separate entities. As development of land and water resources increases, it is apparent that development of either of these resources affects the quantity and quality of the other. Nearly all surface water features, streams, lakes, reservoirs, wetlands, and estuaries interact with groundwater. These interactions take many forms. In many situations, surface water bodies gain water and solutes from groundwater systems, and in others, the surface water body is a source of groundwater recharge and causes changes in groundwater quality. As a result, withdrawal of water from streams can deplete groundwater, or conversely, pumpage of groundwater can deplete water in streams, lakes, or wetlands. Pollution of surface water can cause degradation of groundwater quality, and conversely, pollution of groundwater can degrade surface water. And that's a direct quote from the USGS. According to the U.S. Geological Survey, wetlands cover about 173,000 acres of Connecticut, 5% of the state's land surface. Connecticut has lost an estimated 1/3 to 3/4 of its original wetlands over the 200-year period between the 1780s and 1980s. Increasing the amount of impervious surfaces caused by development, pollution, natural disasters, and global climate change place our freshwater resources, including our wetlands, at risk. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change negatively impacts freshwater ecosystems by changing stream flow and water quality, and is projected to reduce raw water quality, posing risks to drinking water even with conventional treatment. With global climate change, we are likely to see periods of high temperatures and droughts more frequently, which places additional pressures on our freshwater resources. So even just within this year, on June 19th, 2020, the Connecticut Water Planning Council's Interagency Drought Working Group met to review the existing conditions under the Connecticut Drought Preparedness and Response Plan and advise the governor of current conditions and potential for upcoming actions. The state of Connecticut was at stage 1 in June, below normal conditions in relation to a drought. Stage 1 is a preliminary preparedness stage that serves to alert the parties who should be prepared to respond to potentially worsening drought conditions. The primary target audience includes state, regional, and local officials and public water suppliers. Typically, this stage is activated upon the first signals of impacts from abnormally dry conditions. Currently, as of today, according to drought.gov, the US drought portal, 37.4% of the state is being categorized as abnormally dry, which is defined as short-term dryness, slowing planting, growth of crops, some lingering water deficits, and pastures or crops are not fully recovered. And 39.5% of the state is experiencing moderate drought, which is defined as some damages to crops, pastures, some water shortages developing, and voluntary water use restrictions requested. This highlights the critical need to protect freshwater resources. Impacts on our freshwater resources can affect humans, plants, wildlife, and lead to environmental, social, and economic impacts. The purpose of the proposed regulation change is to provide the opportunity for additional protection of inland wetlands. It is not a restrictive regulation that will prevent any development from occurring. It simply aims to ensure proper due diligence is conducted so our freshwater resources are adequately protected. For those who are struggling to decide the exact amount in which the agency should extend the upland review area, I would like to say that in general, it is very difficult to gain scientific consensus around precise numbers due to the nature of scientific research and translation of that research into public policy. It can be very difficult to gain political support of environmental regulations, even if they have the potential to protect people and the environment. For example, we are now all very familiar with the idea of keeping global climate change below 2 degrees. I'd like to point out that the first time that it was mentioned that society tried to keep climate change below a 2-degree target was in 1975. In 1988, NASA scientist James Hansen testified to Congress about the dangers associated with climate change. And in 2015, the Paris Climate Agreement was signed, around 40 years after the 2-degree concept first came into being. However, as a society, we are still struggling to address this very real issue. So I think it's absolutely critical that as an agency, we abide by the precautionary principle. And the precautionary principle involves taking preventative action in the face of uncertainty, shifting the burden of proof to the proponents of an activity, exploring a wide range of alternatives to possibly harmful actions, and increasing public participation in decision-making. At the very minimum, we should follow the recommendations from the Town of East Lyme Conservation of Natural Resources Commission and adopt a regulated area of no less than 300 feet. So I'd like to ask our town staff to please enter the following documents into the public record. One of the members of the public who had submitted testimony had asked about the POCD right now that is currently being amended, and there was a public hearing in which a lot of members of the public actually did talk about water issues. So I'd like to have the following documents added. Town of East Lyme POCD Subcommittee Public Workshop, January 29th, 2020. U.S. Geological Survey, 1998, Groundwater and Surface Water, a Single Resource. IPCC 2014, Freshwater Resources. IPCC 2018, Impacts of 1.5 degrees of global warming on natural and human systems. Environmental Working Group 2020, Drinking Water Standards. Environmental Working Group 2019, Town of East Lyme, specifically, where we exceed some of the drinking water standards that the Environmental Working Group has put in place. CT Gov Interagency Drought Working Group, June 19th, 2020, Stage 1, Below Normal Conditions. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, 2020, Northeast Spring. Connecticut Water Planning Council, 2018, Drought Preparedness Response Plan. Drought.gov, 2020, the map of the state of Connecticut. Drought.gov 2020, a graph showing droughts over the past decade, I believe. And Kribel et al. 2001, the precautionary principle in environmental science, which I quoted directly from that paper. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 items that you've put into the record, correct? It looks like.
Yeah, I think so.
And one of them the letter you're just reading? If you want.
No, I'm not. I just spoke it. That's fine. I'd like to leave it as just that, please. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, so, whoa, it's changing. Things are
Sorry.
changing. It's all right. I was trying to click start video again. Thank you. What are let me move on. Which one's the last one there?
Someone else is also in the meeting, Joe Wren, I've noticed.
Yeah, I messaged him and asked if he wanted to speak, and he hasn't responded. So, oh, hold on. He sent a chat. So.
What was the last item number? Sorry, Rosemary, again, the last exhibit number of yours entered, maybe Jen can help
Her
me.
last exhibit number is DDDD.
Oh, okay, everything that's up on the website so far.
Right. Joe Wren has unmuted himself, so if we want to let him make his comment.
Mr. Wren?
Hi all, this is Joe Wren. I was actually just typing a chat because I didn't know how long the deliberation and discussion would last. But now that I'm on, I can just speak that verbally if you don't mind. Are we in public comment period, I assume?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I am a licensed professional engineer in Connecticut. I own a business, a civil engineering firm in Old Saybrook, but I live in East Lyme with my wife and 4 small children. I am opposed to the application for several reasons. Some are practical reasons, some are as a resident of East Lyme, and some are just basic engineering concepts and reasons. Firstly, just taking my neighborhood, I live up in Harvest Glen, but just taking my neighborhood, for example, we have wetlands surrounding our neighborhood on all sides. And then we have a square, if you're all familiar with it, we have a square with houses on the inside of the square, houses on the outside of the square. So someone on the inside of the square, they're open, they have lawns, connecting lawns and so forth. They have no wetlands on their property. I have wetlands off my property to the back. So I know of wetlands because I know the property behind my property. But those people in the center, they have no idea. So if they go in for a deck, how do they even know to look for wetlands if they're 500 feet away? It could be 2, 3, 4 properties away from them. And even if they suspect that there's wetlands or are told by staff that there are wetlands, how do they investigate those wetlands? How do they enter private property and investigate that there's wetlands within 500 feet of their property? Secondly, is I served as a wetland commission member up in Middletown for a few years in my past. And at the time, we expanded the regulated area, or upland review area, from 50 feet to 100 feet. And that made sense at that time because all of our adjacent towns, Portland, Cromwell, and so forth, already had 100 feet. So how do you, at a town line, how do you go right down, or right up, I should say, from 50 feet to 100 feet? Very difficult to regulate with an imaginary town line in between. Here, you know, adjacent to Waterford, Old Lyme, other towns to the north, we're going to bump up from 100 feet in those towns automatically to 500 feet. It affects so much of the town. I know that there was a map file, a sketch file that shows 90% of the town would be covered by this upland review area. And even though it's not a no touch or no construction area, all of those people that do anything now with COVID, we have pools, we have additions, we have tear down rebuilds. All of those applications have to come before either town staff and or your board. And that's a lot of applications that would quickly overwhelm a board, of course, because 90% of our residents, whatever they do, they have to come before the Inland Wetlands Commission. So it's hard to imagine with such a large review area, such a large volume of applications that actually can be handled by one monthly meeting in a small town. Next is, you have other projects that were approved recently that this may or may not apply to, depending on the certain situation. There are a couple projects that are under appeal right now, and the question is, if this were to be approved, how does it affect those existing projects? Is it fair to those projects that they were approved with a 100-foot review area, all fully unanimously approved by your board, and now all of a sudden there's an extra layer of regulation because this was passed, and brings them back into further regulation? So there are a huge amount of regulations, or a huge amount of unknowns and questions that I don't believe have been positively answered yet. In one case, and I see Henry Amder from Old Black Point Beach Association is online as well. But in a case like Old Black Point Beach Association, where they actually do have inland wetlands, quite a bit of them, 500-foot offset from those wetlands affects every single property in Black Point, just about, if you look at a map. So it could be 3, 4, 5, 6 properties away, depending on the width of the properties and locations of the wetlands. Like, I don't even see how it's possible for someone, any homeowner, to know, even if they had an engineer and surveyor involved, unless every bit of wetlands shows on your town mapping, which it doesn't. It's generally just the larger areas of contiguous wetlands, not small pockets. How does one know, and how do they do the research to know that their project is inside 500 feet? From a practicality standpoint, it just doesn't seem like it could work efficiently. So unless there are answers to those questions, I'm extremely opposed to the increase, such a large increase, even doubling it to 200 feet. It's a long way. Some of our beach properties are only 50 feet wide. Not all properties are 2 acres or 1 acre and everything's contained on that one site. There are a lot of small properties that are existing, either conforming or non-conforming lots, that this would apply to all those people. Many, many people who have never been regulated by wetlands, and they're hundreds of feet away, and now all of a sudden they are. So, and I don't know if you may know of a town by doing some research in Connecticut that has expanded this much, but I don't know of any town that I work in, and we work in about 70 towns that have gone any more than 100 feet, which is the DEP regulated buffer. And there's documentation out there that even vernal pools, if you provide a 100-foot natural buffer around a vernal pool, is adequate, and that's a special wetland. So given all those reasons, the practicality, can it actually work? Can it work efficiently? How do you get on people's private property to analyze wetlands if they're not even involved in the project? All those things, I just don't really see how it could actually happen and function and work efficiently. Those are all my main points for now. I may have more later, but those are the main ones.
Thank you, Mr. Wren. And could you comment your specific address for Sue Spang?
29 Harvest Glen.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't get that, Jerry.
29 Harvest Glen.
29 Harvest Glen.
Thank you.
All right. So I saw anyone else from the public popping in right now? No? We'll just take them as they come. Are there other commission members? I saw Mrs. Chantrell submitted a few documents above Rosemary's when Jen had her screen shared. Would you like to comment and read those in at this time? Is there anyone else that's dying to say something?
Yeah, I can go next. That works.
All right.
All right. So I guess first, a lot of things that keep coming up are that I've been hearing is about applications. And Gary, I wanted to ask you, Gary Gaishel. So since I've been on the commission since January, in 8 months, we've only seen one residential application come before the commission. So on average, how many applications do you get a week or 2 weeks from resident applications within the 100 feet?
Well,
You did, Gary.
Yeah, I just unmuted. I would say it's probably, for decks, pools, and sheds, those types of applications, maybe one a week, one every 2 weeks. Plus or minus. Some months, usually as we enter the summer, you'll get more. So on average, if you average over the 12 months, yeah, it kind of spreads out to 2 a week, somewhere in there.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to get a gauge. I think people think we're going to have hundreds of applications come forth. I'm not sure that that's.
Well, you're going to have them administratively. So those are, what I'm issuing administratively. Now, as building permits are applied for, I've got to look at each one of those and determine whether or not there are regulated activities. And if there are none, I can say there are no proposed regulated activities and the building permit can move forward.
So that's for building permits. So you're looking from a wetlands perspective for building permits currently?
Currently, yeah.
Okay, okay.
Can I just interject here for a minute? Only because as the admin to the building department, maybe I can offer a little bit of insight as far as building permits go. When building permits come in, they are reviewed by 9 different departments, one of which is Gary for wetlands. Even if there's no wetlands present, even things like an interior remodel still get Gary's glance. That's the way the building permit process works. So depending on what kind of permits come in, Gary might see an increase because there's right now we're averaging about 80 permits a week, which is really high for East Lyme. I don't know if that's going to slow down, but I kind of hope it does. But that just to give you an idea of the volume of permits that Gary looks at, that, like I said, some would need permitting from wetlands, some wouldn't, but just to give you an idea of how many permits he looks at a week right now.
Okay. Yeah, those are outside the 100 feet. Those don't have wetlands.
Some are in. Some are in.
Some are in, some are out. Yeah. Okay.
But that's all encompassing of all applications. Jen, you said.
Right. So right now, in a typical week, we're bringing in about 80 to 100 permits.
Right.
Those 80 to 100 permits, regardless of what they are, they get Gary's eyes on them at some point, based on whatever the application is coded as, like a deck, a pool, interior remodel, roofing, siding. Gary does have the opportunity to look at those. He may just check them off and say they don't need him. But now if we change from what we currently have to what you're proposing, there may be more that he will have to step in and say, these need permits, as opposed to what's happening now.
Okay.
I just wanted to have an idea.
Yeah, no, that's what I think the public is interested in. We're interested in trying to gauge the workload that this change could bring. Okay, so I do have some research that I did. Basically, so to start, from what I've read, I'd like to explain where the 100-foot upland review area distance comes from. It comes from an article that James McBroom, a water resources engineer and the author of the River Book that was published by the Connecticut Deep, Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Review Areas from November 2002. He states there is extensive literature on the performance of buffer zones in relation to specific functions. However, much of the data is limited to regional geographic areas or vague, poorly defined land uses. As a result, summaries of the literature tend to be generalized and provide a wide range for buffer widths. The nonprofit Center for Watershed Protection reviewed these buffer widths and found the median to be 100 feet. In the same article by McBroom, he references a publication from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers written by Richard Fisher from the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center that states the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers recommends 60 to 450 feet for flood attenuation and 90 to 1,500 feet for habitat. I submitted into the record the water quality data from our town from 2007 to 2019 that are also posted on our website. This information is included in the flyers that are sent to all residents. To note, the sodium levels in 2007 ranged from 11 to 30 parts per million, and in 2019, the range was 12.8 to 46.5. The high level reported increased by 55%. The nitrate levels in 2007 ranged from 0.54 to 0.95 parts per million. In 2019, the range was 0.48 to 2.96. This increase is 212%. The turbidity, which is noted on the flyer, is a measurement indicating the cloudiness of the water. It is monitored because it is a good indicator of water quality. The turbidity range in 2007 was 0.2 to 1.2 NTU, and in 2019 was not detected to 2.26. This represents, at the high level, a 100% increase in turbidity. This water quality data provided from our town is scientific evidence that shows that our water quality has degraded over time. Ed Pollack, a soil scientist from Connecticut Ecosystems LLC, wrote an article shared from research done on the 8 Mile River watershed. It is stated that the two nutrients that have the greatest potential to impact the chemistry of a wetland or aquatic resource are nitrogen and phosphorus. I would like to note that I will be discussing data regarding buffer width, and to note, buffers are defined as vegetated areas adjacent to an aquatic resource that can, through various physical, chemical, and/or biological processes, reduce impacts from adjacent land uses. Buffers are the key to water quality protection. They are the key to protecting water sources from becoming polluted by activities such as land clearing and development. Meyer, Reynolds, Canfield, and McCutcheon, a 2006 article, Riparian Buffer Width, Vegetative Cover, and Nitrogen Removal Effectiveness, a review of current science and regulations from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, reports that nitrogen removal varies considerably among studies due to factors such as soil type, presence, absence of soil saturation, groundwater flow paths, and organic carbon supply, but that overall forested buffers were most effective at removing large percentages of the nitrogen that they receive. He provided a table that shows that to accomplish 90% of nitrogen removal, a buffer of approximately 367 feet is required. Unfortunately, the state of the science in vegetated buffers has not developed to the point where regression equations exist that would allow a user to input specific site characteristics and propose land use changes and derive a recommended vegetated buffer size. In an article written by T. Hubry in 2013, Update on Wetland Buffers, the State of Science Final Report, recommended a minimum buffer 100 feet under most circumstances. However, for those wetland functions and values of high quality resources with low, moderate, or high intensity adjacent land use, recommended a buffer width of 150 feet to 300 feet. Sweeney and Newbold from the American Water Resources Association in 2014 write that stream-side forested buffers of greater than or equal to 30 meters wide are needed to protect water quality, habitat, and biotic features of streams, about fifth order or smaller in size. Mr. Brian Murphy of the Connecticut Deep Department of Fisheries conducted a review of literature and published guidelines that recommend the preservation of a 100-foot wide buffer adjacent to streams and rivers. These are all examples of buffer recommendations, untouched forested buffers. While I am not suggesting that no activity is to be allowed within these suggested buffer zones, I hope this information puts into perspective our recommendation for extending the upland review area. Our water quality is degrading, development in our town is increasing. Our commission needs to see a bigger picture of what is happening around our valuable inland wetlands and water sources. We have a number of high quality resources in our town, including our aquifers and including our aquifers. We are a shoreline town where all our water flows into Long Island Sound, where the upland review area around coastal wetlands is 1,000 feet. Water quality and protection should be a priority. In our last public meeting, I discussed the importance of vernal pool protection and that some of our neighboring towns are expanding the upland review areas to protect these critical ecosystems. Old Lyme is enforcing a 400-foot upland review area and Killingworth is 500 feet. Other towns are looking to us as we hear from the public to make this important decision. We have heard from a number of residents, from developers, and from real estate owners. And I am in agreement with the suggestion of the East Lyme Commission for the Conservation of Natural Resources that we expand our upland review area to a minimum of 300 feet. That's all I have.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Chantrell, do you want to enter those items into the record?
Let me send them to you. I have to pull them up, but I'll do that on the side. I will send them to you right now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Vice Chair Chantrell.
Kristen, if you can email those to me,
yep,
that would be easier than
sure.
if you put them in the chat. Thank you.
Sure.
And I just want to make sure we're careful on the chat because I know from other meetings that some people don't know how to access what's said in there. So I just want to read. Mr. Wren said, how many building permits are there per year? If 90% of town is now regulated, would it be about 90% of permits? And how do we know if there are wetlands within 500 feet? Jennifer Lindo seemed to have responded somewhat and said, the number of building permits in a year is between 1,200 and 1,800 depending on the year. Just to make sure everyone's seeing those or hearing them at least. Are there any, I've entered a bunch of articles into the record. Any other members of the commission that would like to comment before I blabber on?
I would simply like to ask if all the commission or agency members have looked at page 8 of our own regulations, which makes me question the wisdom of expanding it, where if you look on page 8 under regulated activity, the last sentence of that says, the agency may rule that any other activity located within such upland review area or in any other non-wetland or non-watercourse area is likely to impact or affect wetlands or watercourses. It is a regulated activity. To me, that says we don't need a rule for 300, 400, 500. We can go as far as we want if for some reason we think, after Gary's review and perhaps a discussion, that the activity that they're doing, no matter where it is, will have an impact on our watercourses and wetlands.
And that is what it's supposed, it's kind of the catch-all clause. I know Dave, I spoke with Darcy at Deep and a few other people, and they had said, well, do your regulations have the catch-all clause? And I said, yes. But then we do have situations happen, and I don't think it's fair for me to point at particular activities and single people out unless someone would request that I do so. But there are activities that happen that are clear impacts to potential groundwater, drinking water, ocean water, so on and so forth, that do happen at 100, 150, 200, 300 feet. And unless we're to come in after a building's built or demolished and blasting's been done and police and shut it down, we really don't have, or put Gary in the situation where he's got to go and hand a cease and desist to a guy who's just spent $1 million on a building. Unfortunately.
But if my understanding is that Gary puts his eyes on every single permit application that comes through town. Is that correct, Gary?
I review just about every building permit. If it's interior renovations and does not require any exterior change to the footprint or land disturbance, then I don't actually look.
I'm just stating that the way I see it now is that if you look at it, if there is any activity, if it's 1,000 feet away that might impact the wetlands or watercourses, we have the authority to consider that a regulated activity today.
So we should maybe start seeing more of these applications.
Which is why we would increase the review area.
And another question quickly, briefly. Gary, how much time under your agreement with the town are you expected to spend on inland wetland as opposed to your position as the town planner?
Currently, I spend 7.5 hours per week as the inland wetland agent.
And Dave, I think that's a really important thing to talk about, and it buttresses. Kristen Chantrell said, you know, he wanted to gauge the workload. Clearly, there will be a larger workload here, and I do think I know that our commission may request as a motion to the Board of Selectmen to increase the staffing. From my discussions with Mr. Gaishel, this is something we've discussed, that he would, in fact, it seems already does need, from what you just highlighted, 7.5 hours a week. In my opinion, and we've discussed it, right, Gary, where, you know, we could request as a commission that there be perhaps more time given to Mr. Gaishel, a specific, I mean, we could talk about how we're going to do it. We could just have it. We've had a wetlands agent only in the past. I think we could call upon Cheryl. She could comment on that if she wanted to. Gary might know himself. I think it's a good thing to highlight.
If I may, I think, Mr. Schmidt, that, you know, when somebody comes in with an application, we get a map that says where the wetlands are and then where the 100-foot upland review area is. And if we were to expand the upland review area, it would be a trigger for reviewing whether the activity is likely to affect the wetlands. With the catch-all phrase, it's just sort of like something out there that may or may not be an issue that we wouldn't necessarily have any information about.
Agreed.
I think it's more like casting a wider net of closer scrutiny, whereas we could go out of our way and say, hey, there's this thing, you know, 299 feet away, but we don't, the way I see it, we don't have the institutional capacity to do that on a regular basis unless we say going forward we want to look at that. You know what I mean? I think that's the difference.
Mr. Chair, I hate to interrupt. We're starting to get into deliberation and discussion here rather than focusing on, no offense to anybody, but I think we should concentrate on getting evidence into the record, hearing from anybody who wants to make comments, and then closing the public hearing and then entering into these kind of discussions.
Thank you.
Sounds good, Attorney Zamarka. So with that in mind, does anyone else want to enter documents into the record? I'd like to put mine in, if that's all right, and discuss them in brief. I'm not as eloquent as Rosemary or Kristen, but I'll do my best. Is it okay if I do that now, guys? All right, so Gary Upton, Chairman, we had our last meeting and we were talking and listening to the public, and we had a lot of people that commented in favor, actually technically hundreds, and some very strong voices that were opposed to our regulation change. And the thing I heard was, what's the science? What's the science? What's the science? And as you can hear, some of the scientists on our panel here have presented some information. I am not a scientist. And if you want to know the construct of this team, you can look at our last meeting where everyone reads what their qualifications and experiences in the record. But I got on my little thing and I started searching, and I got on JSTOR and the different things I had access to when I went to school. And I really wanted to put together a nice works cited document that I could submit to my professor, that they would give me at least a D on it, but I didn't have the time. So here I am blabbering, and I'll try and keep it short. I looked into, regulations, and one of the most important pieces that I submitted into the record, the regulations of upland review areas, and then the distance in which pollutants traveled. I thought, what's the science? Well, let's find out what the distance of pollutant travels. We have lots of different pollutants in the world. And rather than just us saying, oh, 500 feet sounds good, after really looking at it, as you heard with Ms. Chantrell's entry, I actually thought 1,500 feet seems to be the most logical number. But that seems like we might have everyone just turn their computers off right now. So one of the things I entered into the record is from the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. The article is called "The Effects of Highway-Related Pollutant on the Groundwater Quality of Turfy Swamps in the Changbai Mountain Area." And I'm not a scientist, but I heard one of our scientists state something about, hold on, let me turn to one of my pages here, regression models. And I tell you, I glazed over when I looked at it. But they go into all these different chemicals that are put on the road and how many cars go by and la da 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 da. After the introduction, there were some interesting parts that I thought were really interesting. It states, I have some highlighted points. Therefore, groundwater is extremely essential for the survival of all living organisms. I think we agree. Even small-scale human activities can result in significant environmental changes. The study was performed in the Changbai Mountain area. This is northern Asia. When they refer to a highway, the interesting thing is the traffic in these highways were 2,000 cars a day. So what they're calling a highway is actually a pretty low standard. That would be something much, much less busy than even Roxbury Road. They go down to 1,500 cars a day, and another one does 750. Again, you can follow along and look at this document yourself. But what I found really got me kind of starting to scratch my head and way, way beyond my knowledge. It states in here that, quote, highway with the affected distances between 15 to 100 meters dependent on location and pollutant. So this is page 11 of this document I put in place. This is stating that these lots of scientific chemical compounds that I don't know the meanings of, I'd need Rosemary and some other people to tell me what they are, but it states that these chemical compounds travel in excess of 100 meters. Now, if you guys can do the conversion, that ends up being right about what you guys were saying, 350-ish feet, right? So that's that document, and I think it's really interesting to look into that. The second document I added was groundwater contamination from the EPA, and sorry if the papers are loud. And it talks about groundwater contamination and how plumes of contamination can go into the groundwater and as such can contaminate the wetlands and kill the organisms and change the composition of the wetlands. You know, you lose a certain algae, and if that algae dies, the water cover dies, and then the trees die and the fish die and the thing dries up and all this crazy stuff. But they refer to bedrock and stone and how a spill can happen in an area. And it can move ground zero to wherever the runoff portion of that ledge or bedrock finishes. Margaret Miner, I believe, was one of the people that read something to that effect in the record in our last meeting. She talked about a half a mile, I think, that they had set back from a building site on some ledge or something. If anyone can clarify, their remembrance is better than mine. But it was a very excessive space that they had put in place for this review area. So that's the EPA thing that I grabbed. It goes into all the different kinds of potential harmful contaminants. And I'll admit, I started Googling a lot of those because I'm like, what's that? I found groundwater contamination, again, old stuff to me. 1985 to 92, the EPA's Office of Pesticides and Toxic Substances and Office of Water conducted a national pesticide survey to determine the number of drinking water wells nationwide that contain pesticides and nitrates. This survey, they surveyed 1,300 public communities and found that approximately 3.6% of the wells contained levels higher than the federal maximum contaminant. Approximately 16.4% of the wells tested contained levels of one or more pesticides above the minimum reported limit, blah, blah, blah. You know, read it if you want. It's good stuff. The next document in no particular order is the historical oil contamination travel distances in groundwater at sensitive geological sites in Maine. and this is from April 30th of 2002. The Bureau of Remediation and Waste Management, Maine Department of Environmental Protection created this document. And there's an introduction, and it's talking about the housing and all that stuff. Based on findings, they found that new UST facilities, underground storage tank facilities in Maine, do have oil discharges despite the use of state-of-the-art technology. So this is new ones, including secondary contaminant. And many subsequently pose a risk to groundwater and nearby receptors. The Maine legislature in 2001 enacted a law governing the siting of new underground oil storage tanks. Blah, 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 blah. The new UST facilities and their components were required as of October 1st, 2001 to be located 300 or more feet from an existing private water drinking well. So 300 feet. Variance from this standard is available for those cases where it can be demonstrated there's no hydrologic blah, 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 in response to proposed. Oh yeah, so in 2002, later after they put this through, there was a bunch of fight back trying to bring it back to 75 feet. It was appealed, and then they still held it at 300 feet. So I thought that was kind of interesting. In the course of conducting the general analysis, the geology of the individual sites and wells were not differentiated: bedrock, sand, gravel, aquifer versus other geological settings. Doubling back on what the EPA told me, that's kind of actually concerning. It seems they should have dug deeper, but this is a team of scientists, and they found that 300 was a good number for them. In the findings section, taking a broader view of the survey findings when comparing the number of sites and travel distances, it was found that at 3/4, precisely 76% of sites, this is important, groundwater contamination traveled as far as 300 feet, as illustrated in figure 2. At the remaining 24% of sites, one or more oil analytes were found to have traveled more than 300 feet. And this is 24%. When analyzing the frequency with which individual analytes traveled distances greater than 300 feet from the contamination source, MTBE, pardon me, did so most frequently, actually 32% of the time, followed by GRO, which is benzene, I believe, and DRO. The average documented distance traveled for GRO, sorry guys, I'm getting boring, right, were 295 and 140 feet respectively. The average MTBE travel distance was 300 feet. The maximum distance documented between a discharge source and a contaminated well was 1,670 feet, and that analyte was GRO, more specifically benzene. Found at concentrations above the federal and state drinking water standard of 5 ppb in a residential bedrock well. So it goes on, and they do all the testy stuff that scientists do to prove that what they've done is actually true. They make some further statements. It kind of argues, and there you go. It's in the record. I grabbed an article from Brett Walton, Septic System Pollution Contributes to Disease Outbreaks. That's kind of a read it for yourself, but it talks about how many septic systems fail, and what it results in from a septic system, the failure, and how it can impact wetlands, change the wetlands, change the water, so on and so forth. There was an interesting quote: "There is very little research on groundwater contamination by septic systems that I am aware of, at least in the United States." Borchardt told Circle of Blue. "There is research into the design of septic systems, but there is a big gap in research on the human health effects." So I think Rosemary or someone said that there was kind of a hole in the research. Through epidemiologists and public health officials, desire more data to better understand the frequency of illness originating from septic pollution. They say that most of the outbreaks could be prevented with greater vigilance and oversight. The out of sight, out of mind thinking is a concern. It's critical to test frequently. So that's that one. The remainder of these things I submitted, of note, I would throw at you, sorry, I'm just pulling up my notes on my cell phone. There was a school that was shut down, and it was a school in Northport. A middle school was shut down because benzene was found in the septic system. Now, the EPA has done a lot of research on the impacts of benzene, and I submitted their 400-page article on benzene. If you remember from the last thing that I submitted, benzene was the actual pollutant that traveled over 1,600 feet. This school was shut down. Benzene was found in the septic system. It's concluded that it comes from a variety of household things. It can come from pharmaceuticals. It can come from fuel. MBTE comes from fuel. Benzene's in cigarette smoke. I don't know if you know, but that's not good to smoke. And I just found that really interesting, that this thing that's so deadly, which is why I put in that chemical thing from the people that are smarter than me, this thing's traveling 1,670 feet. A few other articles on top of that. There's a water science school, science aquifers and groundwater article that I've entered into the record. There is a, I sent the groundwater contamination PDF to Jen. And yeah, well, this last one here. Sorry, guys. See, I told you I'm not as ready. I'm supposed to be on the road. The EPA's blah, 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 won't load. Long story short, if you take these articles and put them together and you use a smart person that can put you a nice little letter together that I didn't have the time to do, it lays out pretty cleanly that this number that you guys are talking about, 300, is pretty much a gimme for what I can see. I don't understand why deep and whatever saying 100 feet. So anyway, it looks like that 1,500 foot number makes a lot of sense, especially if you've got tanks underground. I know we have tanks. We have new tanks underground. As you saw in that main research, we have tanks being installed in our town. This road chemical is traveling more than 100 meters. That's why I think 500 feet, although it seems scary to many of the people that might not understand this stuff, it's actually doesn't seem to guarantee, as the statutes say we are supposed to, probably the most important part of our regulations. I think we can't guarantee the health of the drinking water and the wetlands by allowing 300 feet. I won't read it again, but section 1.1 of our regs is title and authority. That is directly pulled from 22A-36 of the Connecticut General Statutes. It's long and it uses forever guarantee, talks about the loss of fish and all those different things. So that is why it's my opinion, my lengthy opinion, that 500 feet is a safe number for now. Perhaps it should be considered to go further. I understand there were comments of it being burdensome and so on and so forth, but those are my entries into the record. I'm remembering Mr. Zamarka, Attorney Zamarka, saying, Gary, stay on point and just put the bloody stuff in the record and shut up. So we can have a discussion after all that. Look at those things. Thanks, guys. Sorry, it's not very fancy. So does anyone else from the public have something to say?
Hi, Gary. This is Joe Wren. I have some.
Hi, Joe.
Few things. After listening to you and Chris, I just have some more to add to what I had mentioned before, starting with, I believe Kristen mentioned Old Lyme and Killingworth. I do projects in both of those towns.
Could I pause you real quick?
Yeah.
Just, Attorney Zamarka, could I ask you a question, sir?
Sure.
I know we're having a public hearing. We want to hear what everyone has to say. Mr. Wren, please don't take this the wrong way. But when we've had public hearings, I remember very poignantly when we had a public hearing for Twin Valley Lakes, we didn't let the public comment after we had made our comments. But are we doing that now? Is that the right way to do it?
Generally, what you try to do, especially with a continued public hearing, is try to narrow it down to either anyone who has not had the opportunity to speak previously or to address new information. Technically, everything you just entered into the record and testified to constitutes new information. So I do think it is all right for the public to comment on it if they see fit.
Yeah, and obviously we want to hear it. Mr. Wren, please don't take that as insult. I remember us doing that procedurally before, where I remember people wanting to talk and we had said things and then they weren't allowed to, and a lot of that happened. So I just want to make sure we're not contradicting what we've done in the past.
No, in theory, you try to narrow the scope of the public hearing as it goes along, but because of the nature of what's happening here with all the new evidence being introduced, that's not too possible under the circumstances.
Got it. Go ahead, Mr. Wren.
Completely understood, Chairman Upton. And during those Twin Valley Lakes conversations, there was a lot of information being repeated. So I think that was trying to be limited. So there was back and forth between the applicant, the opposition, and the board and so forth. There was back and forth quite a few times, but then there was a limitation on things being repetitive and dragging out meetings for several hours, as you remember. So yeah, everything that Ms. Chantrell and you said is, like Ms. Turner Zamarka said, is new information. And I'm just responding to that information. I'm not really adding anything that I didn't have
Great,
before.
thank you. And I hope the other people that are listening would understand that concept, and thank you for understanding. You're a professional, so you know how this works.
Yeah, we do this in several towns, including Old Lyme and Killingworth that were mentioned. Both of those towns still have a 100-foot review area. I'm doing a project actively, actually, in both towns. Both were approved with 100-foot review areas. The 400 feet in Old Lyme and 500 in Killingworth, I believe those are from vernal pools, which are special wetlands and not just all wetlands. Vernal pools are a very small portion, as you know, a very small area of our inland wetlands, and they're treated more special, and they have different upland review areas. East Haddam, I think, has a 750-foot vernal pool area, but 100-foot upland review area from wetlands, so they're just treated differently. Septic systems were mentioned. Our own current Department of Public Health code allows us to be no closer than 100 feet to a drinking water reservoir. So I know they have to have science behind that to be, somewhat guaranteed. Obviously things like that produce MTB and benzene and very difficult chemicals that travel very quickly through the groundwater, like you mentioned, those things like gas stations and underground storage tanks, there's a lot more controls nowadays than there were before, but they may even have further distances from those critical resources like wells and aquifers and reservoirs, and obviously no new ones allowed within certain distances, but there are those that are grandfathered. So our current 2018 Public Health Code, which is the last updated version of the technical standards, allows a septic system to be within no more than 100 feet to a drinking water reservoir and no closer than 75 feet to a drinking water well. So, there's some importance behind that because it's our own state Department of Public Health, local and current, and the greatest distance that they have from a drinking water supply, something that they would drink water from, is 75 to 100 feet. I understand some of those other volatile VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, travel further, but those compounds are very regulated nowadays and very protected from our groundwater, unlike they were in past decades, and those controls should be there for sure. Jen responded with there being an average between 12 and 1,800 building permits per year, so that's an average of 1,500. Obviously, we're probably going to be 50% higher than that this year because of COVID with pools and decks and so forth. Of those 1,500 permits, I don't know if Gary has an idea or Jen has an idea of how many of those involve wetlands. But I know the 100-foot wetland buffer right now incorporates approximately 20% of the town. I believe that's the number. So if we go to a 500-foot buffer and it incorporates 90% of the town, that's 4.5 times the amount. So if there's currently, say, 20% of the permits that involve wetlands on an annual basis, that's 300. If that doubles or triples, you know, if Gary's only working 7.5 hours for inland wetlands now, how many more hours does he need to work to handle this vast increase in permits? It's a huge area. If you look at the map, it covers almost the whole town. So almost every single project that happens in town, other than an interior renovation or no ground disturbance, like Gary said, how do we handle all that extra work? And how does the commission, with one meeting per month, handle all those extra applications and so forth, on a, you know, being fair to everyone that submits an application? Lastly, I made this point earlier, but based on the new information provided, and the question wasn't really responded to. If you're a homeowner that's not a wetland scientist, you don't know what wetlands are, you don't know where they are, what they are, or even that there are any regulations in place that protect them, and your neighbor's house 3 properties away that has wetlands, how do you know, or how, when Gary goes to review the application, how does one even know? Gary's first question is going to be, are there wetlands within 500 feet? And the only resource he has is either a previous project that most likely doesn't exist for that specific location, or the town wetlands maps. And the town wetlands maps only show the large areas of contiguous wetlands. They don't show all the pockets, small areas of wetlands around town. So I don't understand, and I think more information is needed on how do we expect our taxpayers, our homeowners, to know where these wetlands are, to know that their project's going to be regulated, to know that their project is going to have to go to at least 2 months of meetings with professionals, more than likely, and costing, you know, extra thousands of dollars for their small project they want to do, their small addition, their deck, their pool. I'm not really sure that all of our 19,000 plus residents know that. And I think they should be made aware of that, because it's ultimately unfair to them. Just like I used my neighborhood as an example before. The house is in the center, nowhere near woods or wetlands. They're open with some vegetation in between, just some landscaping. How would they even know where to start? And even if they're told by town staff, or they do know to search for wetlands, how do they get permission to go on these private properties that they don't own, flag the wetlands, and then have them surveyed and shown on a map? More information is needed on that. I don't see how that can happen. And that's everything that I have for now. Oh, one last thing, existing projects, how are those going to be handled? If something was approved by the board in the past and hasn't been built yet, how does this regulation, are those projects grandfathered in? Or if this was passed, does it affect those projects? And how, yeah, I guess this is more of a question for attorneys at Mark, about how does that legally adversely affect other projects that have already been approved by the board? No information was provided on that either for this board.
Thank you, Mr. Wren. Actually, I believe we discussed that at our last meeting at length. I think Mr. Koch spoke about it a bit, but remember we were talking about pre-existing approvals. We can't go back and remove an approval or something to that.
I think what I said is we shouldn't hold off on accepting new applications until we've decided this.
Remember there was some discussion about, you got into the Constitution a little bit.
Yeah. I think I'll talk more at the deliberations part.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll ask one additional insight, Henry.
Yep, thanks, Henry.
My concern is a project that has intervening properties, town roads in between your project and the wetlands. How are those intervening projects or intervening properties influencing any impact on the wetlands? You know, I can understand regulation on abutting properties to the wetlands, but if you have intervening properties, and many of the properties, certainly in the Black Point and other beach communities that do have inland wetlands, have intervening properties, town roads. I just can't understand what the implication of a project with intervening properties and town roads, why that should be regulated when there are other properties in between. And I certainly would like that to be considered in any regulation, making a distinction between properties and projects that are directly adjacent to an inland wetland and those that are internal or have intervening properties.
Thank you, Henry. I think you got muted there.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
You as well. Of course, we want to hear what you have to say. Does anyone else from the public have anything to say before we conclude our public hearing here? Okay, Jen, are you seeing anything pop up? Little blippy things happen? Nope, okay.
Nope, I don't see anybody. Nope.
All right, if it's okay with the rest of the commission, might we make a motion to close the public hearing for this regulation change?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion.
Who made the motion?
Me.
Ted.
Mr. Ted
Who's
Koch.
me?
Ted Koch.
Okay, thank you.
I believe Ms. Berger is seconding. Yep.
Okay.
So we have a motion to conclude the public hearing for our regulation change as proposed by our prior meeting to 500 feet. All in favor, say aye by a show of hands. Commission, you want to put your hand up? That's fine.
Wait, can you say that again?
Well, sorry, we made a motion to conclude the public hearing.
Yes, that's what I moved.
Yeah.
I thought I heard something else.
And I was just saying that we had previously voted on changing our regulations. We sent those regulations to DEEP. I'm just kind of going through what we did per the CGS. DEEP received them. We posted notice. We did all our stuff. We've gone through all the steps to follow the statutes. I think the attorneys and the town's agent will agree that we've adhered with all the protocols and then some. And we are now closing the public hearing for this matter because no one else wants to say anything.
Right.
So we have the motion stands. All in, did I clarify?
Yes.
Sorry. So all in favor. I am in favor. Phyllis? Yes. Kristen?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Ted?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
Dave? Oh, look, a thumbs up. Fancy. Let me see. Sorry, Don?
Yes.
Who am I missing, guys? Did I miss somebody? All right, so everyone's in favor. The public hearing is now closed for this matter. I want to make sure, as an agency, we remember that we can discuss, et cetera, now, but we are not to enter randomly new documents that we might decide that we want to put in. You know, like, oh, shoot, I forgot to tell you X, Y, Z. So all of those things have been put into the record and they are available on the website. Does anyone want to have a chat?
Maybe should we take a quick break before we go into that?
You want 10 or 5, guys? Would you like to make a motion?
I move that we take a 10-minute break before we start deliberating.
I second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. The time is 8:48. We're going to pause the recording. I believe all the members of the commission are in favor. If anyone has a problem, Well, we'll see you soon. 8:48, 8:53:45. Device.
Yep, just call it again at the time so it's recorded.
The time is now 8:59 p.m. after our little break here as we just concluded our public hearing. It's Monday, August 10th, East Lyme Inland Wetlands Agency regarding our regulation changes. So,
Chairman, you should also note that this is now the regular meeting portion as opposed to the public hearing.
all right. We have concluded the public hearing, and this is the regular meeting portion of the Wetland Agency. How did I do? Good. So,
Can I just start by saying, I know there was questions about applications that this is applicable to, and that we're looking at these regulations are going to be applicable to new applications. We can't be retroactive with these regulation changes.
Folks, I hate to be a stickler here, but now that we're in the regular meeting portion, we have the agenda
Oh, sorry.
that we need to follow.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So any comments should wait till the proper time on the agenda.
Yep, we're technically at item number 3, public delegations on the agenda.
Thank you.
all right. Everyone's being serious again. We got all relaxed, I guess. Give me a second, if you would please, everyone. I've got to get out of the materials and get back to my agenda.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, you need to get more screens.
There's a lot of screens here. All right. We are now moving on to item 3. Thank you, Attorney Zamarka and Jen Lindo, for your direction. Item 3 of this time is our public delegation. Sorry. Public delegations is the time when members of the public are invited to speak to the commission about certain matters, issues, or concerns related to approved wetland permits, and in-house proposals or general topics of discussion are open to comment. Agenda items, referrals, applications subject to a decision by the commission, a public hearing, or in litigation may not be discussed. The members of the commission will not directly answer questions or make comment during delegations. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak during this delegation time? Please raise your hand, send us a message, unmute yourself and just start talking. We're fine with that. No one's looking for perfect.
Yeah, I don't have anybody that is asking to speak.
Going once, going twice, sold. All right, moving on from too many screens, to be honest. The acceptance of our minutes. Our last meeting, meeting minutes of June 13th, is that, it was June?
June 13th.
July.
I was gonna say, yeah, it says, yeah, it's July 13th, show cause.
Yeah, it's wrong on the agenda.
Okay. And our meeting of 2020, July 13th. Does anyone have any changes or revisions to those minutes, both items A and B?
Can you give me
Do we
one
have a
minute?
motion for that, Gary?
Not yet, not yet.
Yeah, that's just taking a second. So do we hear a motion to approve the minutes, items A and B from July 13th, 2020, both our show cause hearing and the regular meeting of that evening?
I move approval.
Do we hear a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes from those meetings, please by a show of hands if you don't mind, because this is pretty
Is there any
simple.
discussion?
Sure. I mean, yes.
Oh, I thought Rosemary had something to comment
No,
on.
I'm just eyeing with my hand.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes, I'll go from the top myself. Aye. Phyllis Berger. Yep. Ted Koch.
Aye.
Rosemary.
Aye.
Kristen.
Aye.
Don.
Aye.
Moving down to Dave Schmidt.
Aye.
Thumbs up. Thank you. All right. The ayes have it. There are no nays. All right. Next item. Pardon me as I scramble the screens. Our ex officio report. Mr. Daigle is here with us this evening. Mr. Daigle, it's nice to see you. Let me make sure you're not muted. Jen, he's not muted, right?
Nope. Oh,
Hey,
wait.
there you go.
There you
Hi,
go.
Paul.
Not much to discuss. The public safety building has been consuming the Board of Selectmen the last few weeks. We recently re-endorsed the $7.18 million plan. And that is going to be retaken up for discussion with the Board of Finance on Wednesday evening. Other than that, there's really no, just routine adjustments of budgets, year-end type things from one account to another. So nothing other significant items to report, but thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Daigle. There we go. Item number 6, pending applications. Item A, application to the Town of East Lyme Inland Wetland Agency for a text amendment to amend section 2.1 of the East Lyme Inland Wetlands Regulations to change the definition of a regulated activity by enlarging the distance of the boundary for a regulated activity from 100 from an inland wetland and or water course to 500. And we would ask for Mr. Zamarka, by all means, to referee if we get off track or get somewhere we shouldn't. But I think at this time we could have a little bit of deliberation, if I'm not right.
Yeah, if I may, just very briefly, Mr. Chairman, in light of the fact that there was a whole lot of new evidence submitted into the record tonight, I think it is very appropriate to start discussions, but I would ask a couple of things. First, that everyone who is participating in this note for the record that they attended both public hearings, and if they did not for any reason, that they have thoroughly familiarized themselves with the record. And second, in light of all of the new information, I think it would be the better course to perhaps hold off a decision for at least one meeting to allow everyone time to digest all the new materials. From the close of the public hearing today, you have 65 days to make a decision. So there's certainly no need for rushing.
Understood. Thank you, Mrs. Marka.
Say love you, Dad.
Hold on. Sorry, guys. I got a phone call. All right, guys, I got to go.
Wait, really? Oh.
Hello?
Sorry, guys. I got a baby phone call. I apologize. Sorry.
I thought you said I gotta go to us.
No.
That's what I thought you were saying also.
No,
I heard someone say I love you, and then you said I gotta go.
You're not going anywhere, buddy.
Did someone call for an alternate?
I got a yes. Mr. Deval? No, I got a good night daddy phone call. So anyhow, sorry. That's the problem with this virtual thing, right? You're not literally just gone. Anyhow, so noting Attorney Zamarka's comments, how do we want to continue, guys? What does anyone got to bring up?
I have something I guess I should bring up at the beginning so that it can be in everybody's minds. Having heard the public input, I believe that there is clear and unequivocal public support for expanding our upland review area. As I put in the thing that I wrote and then read out loud, I'm not sure that the public support is as strong for 500 feet. And so I would like to propose something more narrowly tailored to our objectives. And so I'd like to, I guess, ask Mr. Zamarka, do I just propose, we have on the table a 500 foot, and that's just that. And I'd like to propose a slightly more complicated, but not particularly complicated alternative. And I can read what that is. I want to hear what everybody else has to say, but procedurally, how should I go about that?
This is certainly the point to entertain a motion. The thing we have to remember is any decision that the commission makes has to be supported by substantial evidence in the record. Right. When you're dealing with a wetlands issue, the mere possibility of an effect is not enough. It has to be specific and adverse. So anything we do in this case has to be supported by substantial evidence in the record. I think it would probably be a good idea, maybe Mr. Koch, to approach it as not necessarily a motion, but just your thoughts and what evidence in the record you see as supporting that, just to get a general discussion going, because on appeal, the court is going to look at the record, and you are required to put down your reasoning in the record, either in the motion or in the deliberations, but it's better to do it in both instances.
All right, yeah, and that's why I want to do it more narrowly tailored, because for that very reason that you said. So I'll just put my position out there, and everybody can see what they think. I think what we should do is increase our upland review area to 300 feet around our watershed areas and leave it at 100 feet everywhere else. And it would be specifically the Latimer Brook watershed, 4 Mile River watershed, Patagonia watershed, Bride Brook watershed, and Niantic River watershed. The reason why is because there's in our record protecting drinking water in East Lyme, which was presented by the Commission for the Conservation of Natural Resources. They talk a lot about the importance of the watershed areas. That same commission specifically recommended a 300 foot, at least a 300 foot upland review area. They put a lot of research and thought into their report, which is in the record. So I would cite to the work of the Commission for the Conservation of Natural Resources as supporting that. I also understand that it's not it's what we regulate is activities, and it's not just about land. It's about what activities are happening in the land and about what kind of land you have. There is no across the board scientific answer that will spit out any specific footage. There's no pure science for 100 feet. In the record, we have towns all over Connecticut with various distances for various reasons. The town of Lyme, where I grew up, has 100 foot, and then they increase it. I think it goes up to about 250 feet. And they have the 8 Mile River in their town, which is which is quite a clean and well-regarded body of water. So if they can achieve that with 250 feet, but much less development, and our own conservation committee is saying 300 feet, it seems to me that 300 feet specifically tailored to watersheds is clearly supported. I heard somebody say that East Haddam has 750 feet for vernal pools. In the case Queech 258, Connecticut 178, in footnote 25, it's noted that upland review areas vary from 25 to 650 feet in the state. I know everybody's worried about an appeal. The way I see it, if our rule is reasonably related to the goals of the statute, then it will stand up on appeal. And I've heard what everybody said about practical considerations. And the 500 feet everywhere will tie us up. And so for practical purposes, we don't need to walk into a snare. We don't need to create unnecessary litigation that we might lose. Although on the other side of that, when people talk about affecting landowners, not everybody in East Lyme owns land. Some people rent, and the only way it will affect them is through the water. Other people who own land want their land to have clean water on it. And lastly, I understand that the water quality in the north of town tends to be better than the water quality south of town. That's because the water generally moves from north to south and then spills out into Long Island Sound, which shows that it picks up pollutants as it travels. And so that shows you that location of the regulation is important. So those watershed areas that I mentioned are key. They're mentioned in the reports we have. And I think that will, it's specific to our purposes. It is responsive to what I've heard from the public. It is sufficient to increase the quality of our wetlands. And it is not so much that it's such a drastic change for our town employees and for our processes. And we can, if it works out and our water gets cleaner and it looks like it could get even cleaner, then maybe we can change it even more. But for now, that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Koch. I suppose in discussion of what you just said, I hear a lot of what you're talking about, and I know you want to back it with evidence and be intelligent. The only part I'm not understanding, not to say I'm agreeing again, but I heard you talk about 250, 300. That other 100-foot bit that comes in, that kind of doesn't align with the Conservation Commission's statement. So that was a little bit conflicting for me.
Well, 100 is where we're at right now. And what I'm proposing is a targeted increase in the areas that it makes the most sense to increase it.
But they gave 300 all around.
As
Just
a
to
minimum.
make that clear.
They
Just
stated
Yeah, they did. No, yes, they did.
as a minimum, right?
Yeah. So I think
And-
that's important to note. They didn't actually say that 100 was sufficient anywhere.
The thing of it, I guess I would also say is, I know that no one's had time to review the document yet, but the piece that I put in shows you that 300 feet isn't sufficient to protect from roadway salt, especially not benzene and all the other things. So when everyone keeps saying the science, also Ms. Chantrell entered the thing from the Army Corps, I believe. It said 90 to 1,500 feet. I'm sure that's because they were I'm guessing that's because they were referring to benzene and MTBE, whatever the heck it is, those volatile compounds. So I'm just, I I hear that that's, hey, we're at 100. We said 500. We unanimously voted on 500. We sent that change to deep, and hey, 300 is easier to squeeze through and everyone will swallow it easier. I get the logic.
Well, yeah, that's not the only logic. It's that's what they said. And
But that's
I
not.
see that a lot of the surrounding towns have a kind of 100 as the default, and then when they want to protect something specifically, they go to 300. I just think we should be mindful of all the, there's clear public support for it, but there's also people who had a lot of questions about why we're doing this. And I think that if you move incrementally, it will be easier to implement. So that's you guys can talk about that. I would only be repeating myself at this point.
One of the thoughts I had that I was going to bring up, which I wasn't going to bring up, but I'll bring it up as a for instance now, was to say, perhaps suggest, hey, if it's commercial, if it involves numerous units, if it's a developer, if it's not Harry the homeowner, maybe it's 500. And then if it is anyone other than Harry, or if it is Harry the homeowner, maybe it's 300. And then I really kind of put that to the test, and that starts to feel kind of prejudicial, doesn't it?
It's also this commission practicing land use, which is
right. Exactly. It's a zoning job. Yeah. So that's which, if you remember, the onset of this whole thing was to try and keep this thing simple. And I do think we have a job before us after whatever we decide to do, whether it's 100 and we remain there. I think we have a job to support our change with intelligent adjustments to our regulations. I know when we were passing it through, Phyllis was saying, hey, let's talk about putting signs up. We need to get signs up. People don't know that things are happening. We've had so many people come before this commission and say, WTF, I didn't know a house was going up there. So I think there's a lot of handiwork that we need to do, and to let people understand decks and pools and sheds and all those things that I've asked Mr. Gaishel about on the record. You're like, no, those are permitted uses. They don't need to come before the agency. We need to really clarify that and really buttress whatever the heck we do with intelligence. That's why I didn't say 300 for these guys. And I feel like it's a lot like, oh, well, around this special water, I don't know, it sounds complicated.
Can I ask a question about that procedurally? So if we're to make a regulation change versus adding conditions, is there a different process? So say we make the regulation change of 500 feet, and then we further condition the manual to say, well, if you're an existing homeowner and you want to put in a deck and you're outside, certain number of feet, is that a different process to go through conditioning the manual versus a regulation change?
It's not something you can do under this application. This application was solely to increase the upland review area. If you do anything that is more restrictive than that, it has to be renoticed as a new public hearing. You cannot take any action that is more restrictive than that which is just in the public hearing.
I guess I'm saying, so it would be less, not that I'm talking about conditioning today, because I think that's a whole, the regulations we've talked about signage and different things, and we recognize that we need to make changes within the regulations. But minor changes, as far as making conditions, as far as, well, if you're putting in a patio, that would be less restrictive to say, we don't need you to come for a permit. But not that we're discussing that today. I'm just talking about in the future, if we're move forward.
In the future, that would most likely be the subject of another proposed text amendment.
Okay, so we would have to go through the same process?
Yeah.
Okay.
Anytime you change the text of your regulations, yes, you do.
And to be clear, so for tonight, excuse me, is it possible for us to select any other distance, or not just tonight, but this process, is it possible for us to select any other distance other than 500 feet? Hypothetically, is there any other number from 100 to 500 that we could decide upon without us having to submit an entirely new application and do the process in the public hearing? Does that make sense, everybody?
Yes,
Yeah.
I am.
You in theory could, because anything less than 500 feet would be less restrictive. The rule is you cannot take any action that is more restrictive than what was noticed in the public hearing. However, any action you take has to be supported by substantial evidence in the record, meaning on appeal, and I can guarantee you any change that is made will be appealed, and you're going to have 4 or 5 really good land use attorneys coming after the decision. And the judge is going to ask on the appeal, he's going to ask counsel for the wetlands agency, show me where in the record it specifically supports the change for 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet, whatever it may be. Just to remind the commission as well, this seems like it might be a good point to do this. A wetlands agency does have the authority to regulate in the upland review area, whatever that may be, according to statute, when activities there are likely to impact or affect wetlands and water courses. The potential for impact is not enough. It has to be likely and adverse. So that's also something you need to consider when you're reviewing the evidence in the record that you believe supports the regulation change.
And this is why I suggested tying it to the watershed areas that are in the record. And you know, if the commission doesn't like 100 at all, then the way I see it, we noticed 500 to the public. So if we say 200 or 300, they're on notice that could be it. So if we say if I made a motion to increase it 200 feet everywhere in town and then 300 around the watershed, like that's I think what we can talk about, things of that nature.
Attorney Zamarka, can you show me where in the Connecticut General Statutes it says that we could in fact say 499 rather than 500? Because I also dug through Fuller's treatise on this and tried to find something that supported that. And because of the notice process and the very detailed things we have to do, I don't see where it says we can dumb it down.
It's not dumbing it down. The general rule, and I do not have a cite off the top of my head, is that you cannot take action that's more restrictive than what was noticed on the public hearing.
I think it sounds to me like what Mark is suggesting is we could reduce it, but we should have some evidence that supports whatever we reduce it to.
If you increase it by 5 feet, you have to have substantial evidence in the record in support of that decision.
I'm comfortable with the evidence we put forward.
Also am I. I am too, sorry.
One thing you might also want is to take advantage of your wetlands agent. I know a lot of times the agency will request a report from Gary as to his views of the substance of the evidence. My role is to comment on procedure. Gary is your staff expert in these matters. Again, I would caution against making a decision tonight, but I would certainly recommend taking advantage of Gary's expertise, and you can request after the close of the public hearing a report from staff. And anything you requested from Gary or myself would fall under that category and could still be added to the record.
I actually have some questions.
Understood, Attorney Mark. I think it's been made fairly clear where Gary Gaishel, his opinion is on this, both publicly and internally. So,
and yeah, there's been a lot of quotes that have
no
been.
offense to Gaishel, you know I love you, but we know where he's at.
Being said to, yeah.
Can I ask Mr. Gaishel what he thinks about putting it, increasing the area specific to the watersheds I mentioned?
Certainly, if I may. In my professional opinion, I would be more in favor of doing that. Why? Because it's specific, particularly the Patagonia watershed. You've got a whole chain of lakes, streams, and ponds that make its way to Long Island Sound. And we clearly have our town wells fall within that aquifer, the majority of them, with the exception of, say, the Bride Lake aquifer. So if your goal is to protect inland wetlands, I don't know how increasing the regulated area will actually reduce these pollutants that can travel 300 to 500 feet, other than it gives us the ability to review the activity and determine whether or not the activity would potentially cause or have reason to cause for one of those pollutants to make its way to the wetland. So that said, I would say if the goal is just to kind of protect our drinking water through the use of wetlands, as well as protect our wetlands with the water quality going into them, low impact development standards are something that I think the commission could consider as incorporating a little more heavily into the regulations. We do rely heavily on the 2002 ENS guidelines from DEEP, as well as the 2004 Stormwater Quality Manual, which are considered low impact development standards that most engineers follow. So that said, in an effort to protect our drinking water supplies, as well as our inland wetlands within the town, I would be in favor of protecting specifically within our drinking water supply watersheds. You would note that Mr. Koch mentioned the 4 Mile River watershed, and while we don't have any drinking
Can I also add other reasons that, sorry, hello?
Yep. So while that 4 Mile River watershed doesn't have any, municipal drinking water supply wells in it, it is a pristine watershed. So if the town was looking at future water supply issues and where do we find a resource there, the 4 Mile River certainly has potential. So that would be justification, in my opinion, for supporting the increase in those areas.
It's not just the drinking water that we want to protect. I think that the wetlands affect the farmland. They affect recreation in town. They're related to our geological features, even like our cultural and historical heritage. When you see the wetlands and the tall grass that grows, it's a unique feature of our region. So drinking water, yes, but also all of those things are reasons that we have for increasing our view of what happens in the upland review area.
I would point out that any wetlands agency has a fairly limited jurisdiction. I certainly understand the goal of protecting groundwater, drinking water. We need to remember that the town of East Lyme has an aquifer protection agency already. So any concerns that this agency may have about protecting aquifers are addressed by the Zoning Commission, which also acts as the Aquifer Protection Agency. Also, we need to remember that the function of the Wetlands Agency is to supervise regulated activities. The Connecticut Supreme Court has held time and again that any wetlands agency is not a little environmental protection agency. The Wetlands Agency is limited to considering only environmental matters which impact wetlands. Other environmental impacts must be raised before the appropriate agency. So while certainly a lot of what has been talked about during this is aspirational, we need to remember that the charge to a wetlands agency isn't quite so broad.
Well, it has to be reasonably related to the purposes of the statute. And when I see in the statute, they do talk about a lot of different things: flood and pollution, quality of wetlands, conservation, economic, aesthetic, recreational, and other public and private uses and values. So it's not that I think that it's not that we would be trying to do all of that within the upland review area. It's just that those flow from the protection of the wetlands, those purposes, right?
Understood.
Guys, I think, can you guys hear me? I know Ted kind of phased out there for a minute. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I phased out.
I think it's important that we consider the people that came forth. And I know it might have sounded funny to ask people what they did, but we had some strong opposition from developers. Numerous attorneys that showed up were actually the past recipients of cease and desist orders from us. You know, so these are strong voices, and I feel that now that we've had some of these strong, it feels a little underhanded or weak of us, if I may say, to have received a petition with hundreds of people saying, we support this. And very specifically, Ted, they supported 500 feet. It was 186 people. They were confirmed as residents of the town. And then all the other people that have sent emails, and I haven't counted them, and I probably should have. I haven't had time to do that, and I know everyone's working here for free. But I would guess we've had in excess of 250 people that have said, yes, 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 500 sounds good, I like it. And we've had a few, Harry, the homeowners, say no. A lot of them seem to misunderstand that putting a deck on is a regulated activity. A gentleman stated earlier, you know, what's this going to do to me? We do respectfully have the president of housing associations. We have attorneys that own large plots of land, and they're saying, hey, I'm against this. I really think it's important we consider the voices that are opposed, and then we consider the voices that are for this that have no gain or loss by being for it. I think it's a little weak of us, and that's my opinion. I'm just going to say that we unanimously voted 500 feet. I do believe we've put scientific evidence into the record that I believe a judge would read. It would be my opinion that it would be 1,600 feet. There seems to be science proving that a tank and things that are in place, even septic systems that can have benzene in them, from the thing that I submitted from the school that was closed because the septic system had benzene in it, and they closed the school, and that stuff travels 1,600 feet. It seems the evidence would support that number. Margaret Miner said large numbers. I think we're getting, I understand we're like, well, let's just take that little baby step. Okay, I mean, if that's, I don't know.
May I also add that I heard Pat Young from the 8 Mile River Project state that she felt 100 feet was an adequate and doable situation in, you know, regulation in most cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I do share the concern, which I saw in my many years in Wilton, that litigation is very expensive, and we will probably lose a large number of those. And once that happens, you lose local control and local autonomy. And I can cite specifically a company called Trammell Crow that later on became Avalon Properties, that buys up large parcels of land to develop, and they use the Affordable Housing Act to go to court and sue and win, and it takes away all local control of the application going forward after that point, and they win every time. They build a 7-year model into their business program that it will take them to go through the litigation process and come in and sue us. And that is one of my fears. Just wanted to put that out there.
Can I ask Gary Gaishel a few questions about, if you can, I don't know because you're not working for DEEP, but the coastal wetlands requires a 1,000-foot buffer. How does that work? We've seen a lot of coastal communities concerned with the 500 feet, but they're already under the 1,000-foot coastal requirements. So
I would say, I would remember that it's not a buffer, it's an upland
Right.
review. And
which is what we're proposing as well.
right, and so it's a 1,000-foot coastal area management space that the zoning commission reviews activities within. They have a whole form and checklist that they review and go through. So DEEP isn't necessarily doing that review. It'll start with the local zoning commission, and depending on the activity, it may trigger certain thresholds, and then they have to go to DEEP, obviously, to get those permits.
So that would be similar to what we're proposing here, is that it's a 500-foot upland review area for these coastal communities. I know they have very small properties, and they think that all of a sudden they're going to incur all these fees, but they need to then they need to see if they need to request a permit, similar as they do for the coastal wetlands process. We're not saying if you're 475 feet from the inland wetlands, you have to pay us money to put in your deck. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that we just want to have the review area and the potential, if you, as the wetlands officer, deem, that it would be applicable for a permit, then they would have to go through that process. But isn't that kind of happening currently within the coastal zone?
Within the coastal zone, I would say within the current upland review area, it's just if you're within 100 feet, you got to get a permit. So it is a little different that way, but yeah.
But within the coastal zone, if you're within 1,000 feet, you have to get a permit,
At least go to the zoning commission and get a review.
which may trigger deep and a variety of other
Yeah, depending on
section
the
agencies.
activity. Right. The local agency would act first, and then they would go off to deep if necessary.
Much like the Phragmite removal of your brother's keeper.
Correct.
Yeah, because I just want to clarify, because I feel like that's been kind of the most outspoken public members have been coastal communities, but they already fall under this 1,000 foot, and we're asking half that for inland wetlands, that the process would be the same. I mean, it's not gonna, it would be similar.
Can I just interject for a second? One of the things that Kristen, you had hit on was the fees. Gary, maybe you can clarify for the commission that the fees are different for agent applications and as opposed to a commission application. There is a significant difference in the cost of those two different permits. An application that goes before Gary as opposed to an application that comes before the commission.
Right, and we see very few applications come to us from residents currently because Gary is able to filter through the ones that we should see. And I imagine, like you keep saying, Harry, the homeowner, you're still gonna you're not gonna come to us if you're putting in a patio or a deck.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've
Directly impacted the wetlands.
and there was one application that we've seen in the past 8 months that did that.
And the burden of the expense is on the owner, not on the town.
Right.
That's true.
Yep.
Which, I mean, I guess if you're putting on a $100,000 extension on your home or a $20,000 deck, you're probably not flipping out if it costs $500 to apply.
It's more like 1,000, but yeah.
So it's inconsequential relative to the investment.
But yeah, I guess I just want to reiterate, like they're already going through this permitting process similar to what.
Yeah, I guess their concern is that they one permitting process is enough for them. I think that's just from what I heard. Not that I'm endorsed federal taxes. You don't want the UN to tax you, I should also note, I just forgot in passing that I did
Losing you, Ted.
Yeah.
Sounds like Ted's internet cut out, so we didn't hear.
That's a
you did something, Ted. What was it?
I'm sorry, I keep cutting out when I'm talking.
There are some power outages going on in some of the beach communities right now in East Lyme.
All right. I have reviewed the record. I reviewed the record.
Thank you.
Gary, do you want to get everybody else on the record for that?
Yeah, why not?
I think that's only necessary if someone was not at one or other of the public hearings, or for part of it in Mr. Koch's
okay. Well, yeah, Ted, you left early that time, right?
Yeah, I left while things were being read into the record, so I've read all of that.
And we had a whole bunch of fun after that.
I'm sure you did.
It was great. We missed you.
I missed you too.
I suppose that's perhaps why, Attorney Zamarka, I like the idea of the added workforce of one of our alternates, just to buttress any holes that there might be. I did look in our bylaws, and it doesn't say there can't be 8 people. It does say our commission is 7. So that was all. All right, guys. Well, who else has things to say? What do we want to? Should we go for,
I have another question for Gary. Again, so people were talking about, well, how am I going to know if there's an upland, if I'm within the upland review area of 500 feet? How do residents currently know? Because case in point, we didn't know we needed to come to the commission and we're within the 100 feet. So how do current residents know that there's 100 foot and how, I guess I'm saying a lot of people are concerned, how are they gonna know 500 feet? I didn't know what 100, so.
I didn't know the speed limit was 35. Sorry, officer.
No, well, that's what I mean. I mean, I would love, as part of our commission moving forward, to write letters to people, letting them know, like, here's the upland review area, just so you know, you're within this area, please come see us. I mean, that would be a kind of a volunteer task. I think maybe the commission would be willing to take, possibly.
Yeah.
But I guess in lieu of that, like, how do people know they're within the review area currently?
We're going to put your name on them all.
They won't, but it's always been upheld that ignorance to the law is no excuse for breaking it.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, so I don't get a ticket for that 50 or 35.
So basically, I think you somewhat answered your own question. You wouldn't know. You would come to the town, and I would look at the GIS map, and which uses the Soil Survey of Connecticut, which was from 1972 or 3. It's a 30,000 foot view based on soil types in a survey that was done in 1970s. But it's an indicator, it's a guide, it's a resource that I can use to say, you know what, there's a good likelihood there's some wetlands. I'm going to need to go out there and look on the ground and look for the indicators that show me that, oh, this is most likely a wetland. Please go delineate it or show me that it's not. So that's kind of how it's done now, is using those resources, going out into the field and looking ahead of time, saying, okay, this activity is going to need a permit. So when that building permit comes into my office and I'm reviewing it, and I say, oh, well, looks like there's some wetlands nearby because I look at the GIS map, or unless I know from looking at adjacent parcels historically that, you know, oh, they're going to need a wetland permit. So I may have to drive out there, take a look, return to the office and get back to them and tell them they need a permit or not. That's kind of how it's done. You know, again, I know we did hear the comment, you know, at 500 feet, well, how could someone go in and delineate a wetland if I'm 400 feet away and I don't own the property? Well, that's no different than if the wetland's on the adjacent parcel, but I'm within 100 feet. So you still got to, at least, maybe you can't get down there to delineate it, but you can identify that it's there and note that the resource is on that adjacent parcel. So I think that could be handled.
With it being said that like 500 foot could make what 80 or 90% of properties have to get a wetlands permit, right? That's one of the statements that's been made.
Under the current, being that we're only changing the distance, so the rest of the regulations remain in place. So technically, anything within 500 feet would automatically have to apply.
Right. So what I'm getting at, that sounds like most properties in the town of East Lyme have wetlands on them.
It may sound like that, but that's not, in fact, the truth. It's a 500 foot upland review area.
Most properties within the town of East Lyme are within 500 feet of a wetland.
That's more accurate, correct?
Okay. And what happens on those? Okay, I mean, those are things that's something to distill, I think, for the commission. Most properties within the town of East Lyme are within 500 feet of a wetland.
That's probably
water course, right? Water courses, not just wetlands. Water courses add a lot of miles to the mileage of wetlands.
Yeah.
My son submitted a letter at our last public hearing, and currently there's a stream about 150 feet beyond his property line. And today, if he were to apply, he would not need an upland review area permit or a it's more than 150 feet, but it would not need any application today to do anything on his property. And it might require him to do something on the back portion of his property. But if we enacted 500 feet, it would require him to apply for a wetlands application for anything done on his property at all.
Right, Dave, but think about this. If he put two 275-gallon tanks of diesel fuel in his basement, based upon the science that we've read, if those tanks were to leak, they're guaranteed to pollute that stream 150 feet away.
If you put 2 tanks in your basement, you You don't go to IWA, you don't go to Gary for that permit.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Within the current regulations, you get to do all of that, and it's if those tanks are to be ruptured for any reason, it's a guaranteed pollutant of that wetland.
The things that the upland review area protects are cleaning, grubbing, grading, paving, excavating, filling, constructing, depositing, removing, and discharging. So if he does any of those things and we increase our upland review area, then we get to take a look at it.
Yeah, can I just say, like, there's non-permitted activities that can happen within the upland review area.
All the time.
So we're not saying any activity requires a permit, just permitted activities require a permit.
If you're putting 2 tanks in your basement,
Well, I don't know about that example.
no, if you're replacing a basement fuel oil tank, and this is the business I was in while I was on the commission in Wilton, we replaced thousands of oil tanks. You don't come before inland wetlands if you're putting in a new tank in your basement. It
Right,
doesn't.
but if he starts grading stuff and you know, hypothetically creates a downslope.
You're putting the tanks in your basement, not outside the house, not underground, not a UST.
I'm not talking about the tanks anymore. I'm talking about like one of the activities. If he starts doing grading and excavating,
yes,
then that's something that we would want to take a look at.
Well,
I think the board is interested in expanding the 100 feet because it seems to be inadequate at this point, at least in, you know.
Let's clarify my example, I guess. Then let's depersonalize it and say he doesn't have a home there, and currently a home isn't built, and then it gets built, and that homeowner, in the process of applying to build the home, doesn't have to adhere to any setback review because he's at 150 feet. And so the activities that are a result of the initial activity allow him to build a home and then put those storage tanks in the basement with 100 foot, almost have a guaranteed potential to pollute the environment and change. Yeah, I was just an example. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think the concern is that it's not the right example to give.
I'm not sorry. It's what I had.
And one other thing I do need to point out, the potential for impact does not constitute substantial evidence.
Oil is not going to hurt the environment. We're good.
Well, I would also like to point out, Gary, and I do have a lot of knowledge in this area, the tanks that are being constructed and installed in homes today,
of course,
because of federal and other regulations, are not nearly as likely to leak as tanks that were installed. As an example, when the state required USTs to be yanked out of the ground in the late 70s, early 80s, and they were done in great and large quantities, there was a huge influx of tanks that were made in Canada that never lasted more than 8 to 10 years. The tanks that are made today come with 30-year guarantees. They come with interstitial spaces and double bottoms. They're not going to leak. There's a big, big difference in the potential impact of a tank installed today as compared to one that was installed 20 years. I would tell anybody that has a tank in their house that's more than 15 years old, tear it out, throw it away, and put in a new one today.
Let's go with that example.
Unfortunately, we can't do that. But I'm just saying that, you know, there's a lot more to consider.
Mr. Zamarka, am I right in understanding that I read the Queech case today. You know the Queech case. I think you talked to us about it, right?
Yeah.
So it says that the upland review area provides the commission with a trigger for reviewing whether activity is likely to affect the wetlands or water courses.
Correct.
That's what we're trying to do, right? And
Correct.
what you're saying is we need substantial evidence in order to justify increasing the upland review area.
Correct.
So our conversation now is about whether we have in the record that substantial evidence, right?
Correct.
And it is also a reasonable thing to look at the regulations of our sister towns, right? We can look at whether it's reasonable to well, you know what my question is.
Yeah, it is reasonable to look at those, but I would caution using those as a basis or even more a sole basis for moving forward, because your concern are the wetlands and watercourses located within the town of East Lyme.
Right.
This would be a good point to bring up too. I know in the record there is the document from DEEP, the URA guidelines. I am not going to say I'm going to speak on the substance of it, but in reviewing it, I did see that further on in the document, they set forth procedures that they went through in determining upland review areas in terms of, I believe, taking surveys of the wetlands and water courses and things like that. In as much as that is sort of a handbook for this sort of thing, I think that's something that would also be worthy for the commission to give some consideration to.
Because each town has its own unique features.
Exactly. Exactly, which is why you'll see, as we noted, some towns will have increased areas around vernal pools or certain wetlands because there are specific concerns as to those.
When I think I was looking at what Doreen put in, I think I was the one who first moved to put on our agenda increasing the upland review area, and I said to increase it to 200. Then we were looking at other towns and we heard that Burlington had 500. So we decided, why not go for 500? And in our record, it says that Burlington has a 100-degree upland review, 100-foot upland review area as a default. They have 500 feet from a specific bog that they mentioned.
Okay.
So again, this is why I'm suggesting measurements specific to our aquifers.
And I would just say my guess is the record of whenever, I'm sorry, what town was it?
Burlington.
Burlington. That when they did that, there was, my guess is there was specific evidence in the record as to why this one particular area needed the additional protection.
Right. Well, we have Mr. Gaishel on the record agreeing that our aquifers could use extra protection.
I wouldn't dispute that.
You do dispute that?
No, I said I wouldn't.
Oh, you would not? Okay. Well, I must have really misunderstood something then.
Me too.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
That's the internet.
Yeah.
Okay. Right now, okay, so I think, Don, you have to leave at 10:30, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, right now it's 9:56. So we've got like 34 more minutes. Just to bear in mind. I don't know, is it kind of worth seeing where people stand more explicitly on some of these different distances? Gary, are you raising your hand?
What
You're the leader, so you do whatever.
What I've seen other chairmen do in commission situations like this, where we're just in this nebulous state of,
yeah, I'm just like,
goes from me to Ted to the attorney to you to Chris, and we could just probably do this all night long.
Forever.
Is we run the roll call, and if people have any particular comments they'd like to make, they can make such, and then I would call for a motion. And as the chair, I'd prefer not to be the one to make the motion. I'd like it to be one of you guys. I think we need to keep in mind what we've put on the record. I think we need to keep in mind everything we've talked about, and I don't want to be too directing by saying so. So if that's okay, does anyone think that's a good idea that we maybe do that to, as you're saying, get things going? You know, just like Don, I've got to get going at 10:30 also.
Given
Mr. Chairman,
if I may,
I'd recommend, Gary, I'd like to recommend the other chair agency members that haven't spoken should share their point of view at this time.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying we'll go.
Let's go and do it.
Yep, let's do it. So I've said what I have to say, and I feel that Ted, you've said what you have to say, right, Ted?
Yes, sir.
All right, and Kristen, you've said what you have to say.
Yes, I'm good.
And Rosemary, have you said what you have to say?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Schmidt, it seems that you've said a few good pieces. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
tend to lean towards supporting the proposal that Ted Koch has put forward.
All right, and so I'll go right to the top and I'll go to Mrs. Berger. What do you have to say, Phyllis? Let me unmute you or unmute yourself.
Can't hear you.
Yeah. I don't think, I think everybody's presented some great information, but I just don't think the 500 is practical. I like Ted's suggestion of the 300. As far as the bodies of waters that he suggested, as far as, so what about a stream running into Patagonia Lake? How would that be protected? Would that only be 100 feet?
Right, it's dangerous.
It would be whatever, the watershed area is a specifically delineated area. So it would be 300 feet from that.
But then we would be, as we said, we'd be contradicting the Conservation Commission's recommendation.
Not contradicting, we would just be more circumspect.
And I'm sorry, to be clear, it's not 300 feet from the delineated area. It's the streams, water resources, everything within the watershed area would have that 300-foot upland review area. Okay.
Okay, so that's it? Yeah.
So if I'm clear, what you're saying is 300 feet from watercourses and wetlands within the watershed. So all the wetlands and watercourses within any one of those watersheds that were previously listed.
Or any watershed. I think Ted meant, right? Rather,
I mentioned.
Are you saying that your list is expert developed, or are you throwing a few things out?
No, I got this from the Protecting Drinking Water in East Lyme exhibit that's in our record. It's Latimer Brook watershed, Patagonia River watershed, 4 Mile River watershed, Niantic River watershed, and Bride Brook watershed.
Gary, can you give us an estimate on how that would actually differ from just 300 across the board? Because I believe, I'm not positive, but just thinking about these watersheds, I feel like that's actually going to cover almost all of the area.
The same area.
That's how watersheds work, because you're either going to one or the other.
That's pretty much the majority of the watersheds in town.
I know, but I'm just asking if that's going to also cover all of the land almost. Like, what percentage of the land do you think is not going to fall within those watersheds that Ted just named? Because I feel like that's going to it's just 300 feet again.
And again, 300 feet is less than the science shows in the articles that have been submitted if you review them. So I completely disagree with that, because it's less than the science states in those things that I submitted. And if you're telling me those scientists are wrong, then go for it. But show me your credentials.
I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying, I think you have to be practical. And I don't think anybody wants to see the town be dragged through court. Not that that's a priority for me. But I just think.
But isn't that an arbitrary number? If we're grabbing a practicality number alone, I'm not a judge, what do I know? But well, they grabbed a number that was more practical. I'd say, well, why didn't they grab the one that the evidence supported?
Keep in mind that the evidence is supported and a lot of different numbers have been quoted from what has been submitted. You guys
have holes in the research on this stuff. It's not
you have the opportunity to look at the evidence and come up with a number that you think is supported by the evidence received as individuals. And as the attorney stated, there were items submitted tonight that you may not have all had the opportunity to review. So as you continue this conversation, keep in mind, you've heard pluses and minuses. You've heard 1,500 feet, you've heard 100 feet. There's a lot of information that's presented. You have to review that and assess it and come up with a recommendation. I welcome the recommendation for Gary to give your report. That doesn't mean you have to follow Gary's view. It's another piece of evidence that you can use to come up with what you think is the best regulation change going forward. You all have difference of opinions. There's townspeople who have difference of opinions. Your choice, your responsibility is to look at all the evidence and then come up with something. And this discussion about sharing your point of views at this time is only going to help you get to that point.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah,
So
and-
I would like to
think
see
it's important
Gary's
to let-
report.
Yeah, Ms. Berger finish what she was saying too. Yeah, sorry.
Well, I think Gary's been around long, Mr. Gaishel has been around long enough that hopefully he should be able to give us his opinion on what he thinks is a good way to go.
And again, just being clear for the record, that's been stated in the newspaper. Gary, can you give us that
Well,
more?
what's in the
No,
newspaper is
I
not in
think
the
he-
record.
I think, we should review it. Give him the chance to write up something and then let's look at it. We don't necessarily have to go along with it.
Mr. Daigle, it's understood that common knowledge is actually part of the record. I actually spoke to an attorney that clarified that for me when I was trying to, like, we're going to agree that water is H2O, right? We didn't put into the record that water is H2O, but we agree that water is H2O.
Then I'd recommend you ask the attorney if my opinion was incorrect and yours is correct.
Thank you for your recommendation. Ms. Berger, do you have anything else to say?
No.
So, we haven't heard a word from Don. And I bet it's probably pretty smart because he listens more than he talks. And I need to take many pages from his book. I got at least 5 people to laugh. Mr. Fimister, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I do. So here's what I know. Every time I've ever served on a committee, I've always worked in the guidelines of what the law said. And everything I've looked on here talks about what's supported by the law. I really don't think I should be a policy holder or a changer that way because I don't know enough. I built submarines and I save people's lives with medicine. That's what I do. But I don't know anything about wetland stuff. I'm learning a lot. We've never talked about slope in any of this stuff ever. And it's in the guidelines for most of these rationales for why we do stuff, for the water courses and stuff. It's not only the slope, it's also the buffers and the plants involved and the distances involved. But 100 feet is what everybody's ever talked about for the past 20 years. I appreciate new science. And, I live for it, but I wouldn't want to just set a whole new policy on a couple of papers. I need to look at more of the information. And I can't just go shooting my mouth off with stuff that I just read off on one page. I got to look at the stuff and I got to study it. So that's what I've been doing. And I think I need more time. I need at least another meeting to look at everything you guys have talked about, because that's new stuff to me. I haven't heard any of that about 300 feet anywhere. And all of the stuff we talked about in the guidelines here and studies that have been done and white papers. I mean, there's all this stuff here. So there's a lot of information. But this is going to have a huge impact on our town legally and financially for all of our residents. And it's a big decision. And it shouldn't be taken lightly.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just to piggyback on what Mr. Femister said, and as I noted at the outset, in light of the large amount of evidence that was just entered into the record today, the agency has done an excellent job in starting the discussion on this and really trying to get into it. But I do think it is incumbent on everyone, especially in Mr. Femister's comments and what Mr. Daigle said, to take a little more time and make sure that every piece of evidence is considered. As noted, this is going to be the subject of a lot of scrutiny, and you're going to want to make sure that whatever decision you finally come to is supported by substantial evidence in the record. I would not recommend a motion on Mr. Koch's proposal, on the 500-foot proposal, or anything else tonight, in light of the fact that there is so much more evidence that I don't think everyone has had the chance to go through.
Mrs. Zamarco, we only brought that evidence back because we had an opinion from what seemed some concerned developers that we didn't support what was our opinion for 500 feet. Can you elaborate for me to understand that the legislative law and the requirements of legislative law and it not requiring the scientific requirement that we've actually presented?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Mr. Upton.
It was put to me that we weren't set to the same scientific standard as legislators, essentially, that are backed by the CGS, that we need to sit here and be scientists and prove that 503.72 feet are scientifically the best amount of feet required to protect our wetlands. I understood, and I'm asking, I'm sincerely asking you, this is not a play around question, because I tried to understand it in Fuller's book, and I was like, I'm not an attorney and I do not get paid to do this, and I give up. But it came to my understanding that we didn't need to sit here and be scientists like we were being pushed to be. And we're actually kind of getting outside of our scope to do so.
Well, no one is expecting the members of the agency to be scientists, but the evidence that a wetlands agency deals with, just by the nature of the types of applications it sees, is far more scientific based than any other land use agency. Whether or not there is specific evidence that points to 100 feet, 150 feet, 2,000 feet, whatever decision you make simply has to be supported by substantial evidence in the record, meaning when this goes up on appeal, and we are pretty likely sure that it will, the judge will expect the agency to be able to point to specific evidence in the record, substantial evidence showing a likely adverse impact on the wetlands as a justification for whatever increase in the upland review area is ultimately decided on. And I think initially at the first hearing, the only evidence in the record was that brought in, I believe, by Mr. Geisel, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, and there was a lack of evidence as of the first public hearing in support of increasing the upland review area beyond the 100 feet that it already was. Again, as the applicant in this case, being the agency, it's incumbent on the agency to be able to support their position with substantial evidence in the record, which I believe is why we're going through this exercise now, the additional evidence that was brought into the record tonight.
Can I make a motion?
Can I?
Hold on.
Wait, hold on.
Anyone can motion anytime they want. Of course you can. I heard that first, so I'm just going to be a chairman. Yes, you can make a motion, Mr. Koch. Please do.
Sorry, Rosemary. It's a quick motion. I just want to move to get Mr. Geisel to give us a report, mindful of my earlier motion, specific to the watershed areas.
But can I make a comment directly related to that?
Sure.
So
as far as
all land is within a watershed. So the land in our town is either going to be in any one of those watersheds that you mentioned. So you're
Good.
saying 300 feet, but everything will be part of one of those watersheds.
Well, then he also might tell us which watersheds are of greater use to protect.
I just want to make sure that I note so far there isn't a second to the motion.
I'll second it to get it out there for discussion.
All right, so now we can discuss it a little bit. Let's go on with, sorry, Rosemary, I just want to make sure we're doing that the right way.
No, it's fine.
So you're stating, hey, it should be 300 feet anyway, because
Because it's either one watershed or another one. So it's like all land within the town is going to fall within one of those watersheds. So you're saying, okay, well, let's just do it in the watersheds. I'm like, well, okay, that's still 300 feet everywhere.
Well, and then if that's the result we get, then that's fine. But there also might be some watersheds that are more essential to the aquifer and that are more likely to go into the Long Island Sound, or that are more likely to, be of greater value to the wetlands of town than others. And I'd like to know about that too.
I think that's where you get dangerous, Ted.
It's just a report. It's just more information.
Mr. Zamarka, are we within any statutory timelines that we need to worry about right now?
Not at all. You have 65 days from today to render a decision.
From today, because we closed the public hearing 2 days.
Because you closed the public hearing, correct. You also can take extensions. The statutes allow you to do that. Normally, it's the applicant who consents to an extension, but in this case, since the agency is the applicant, you have extensions available to you. Under the executive orders, you also potentially have further extensions available to you. So no, there is no ticking clock at this point.
Today, today, technically, with the extension we motioned last time, we would have 90 days from today, I believe.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
May I ask a question? Is it legal and appropriate to accept new reports into the public record now?
We closed the
If
public
it
hearing.
is a report from staff, yes. However, in terms of evidence other than a report from staff, meaning from Mr. Gaishel or myself, you're limited to the evidence in the record because the public hearing is closed.
We are allowed to accept a report from Mr. Gaishel.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And what about any new applications? What if the town receives an application tomorrow?
Doesn't matter.
Then it proceeds under the regulations as currently written.
So my opinion is that if we do anything less than 300 feet, we are going against the recommendations of our conservation committee, of an entire committee, most of which are scientists, which I find our town's committee. So I find that disturbing, especially when so many people were in favor of 500 feet. Yep.
Mr. Daigle has something to say? Mr. Daigle, 1 second.
You're muted, sorry.
Sorry. Just want to remind you, there's a motion on the table asking for a report. You should discuss that, not 300 feet, 500 feet, or 100 feet.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that the report doesn't bind us in any way. It's just more evidence. And if it's substantial evidence we're looking for, then it can only help.
All right, so the motion was to request a report from Mr. Gaishel regarding, can you specify, Sue, are you clear on the motion?
I can
Can I get a question? I have a question.
Well, let's make sure Sue knows what we're talking about, and then we'll do a little more discussion. Sue, what did you get? Oh, more muting.
Sue is muted. Unmute yourself, Sue.
Okay, I apologize. I was going to ask Ted if he could be more specific as to a report. I've got asked Gary Gaishel to give a report, and I wasn't clear on what you were asking for.
I would like a report from him about the impact of increasing our upland review area around those watershed areas that I mentioned. Specifically, whether there is substantial evidence, according to him, that a 300-foot upland review area would be reasonably related to our goal as a commission.
So if I had asked Gary Gaishel to give a report of the impact of increasing the upland review area to 300 feet in the watersheds, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you have any timeline? Like Gary could take a year to create a report. Like, do you have any
for the next meeting?
Okay, thanks.
has to be done, has to be done before we take action, obviously.
Well, that's dangerous, Dave, but, because we could have delays and then we can't take action. Ted, could I suggest perhaps to contrast it to a broad spectrum 300-foot review area?
Well, yeah, if it's true that everything's within 300 feet of a watershed area, then that's just a matter of semantics. It's just, we'll see it when we get it. Whatever his facts uncover, we'll see the report, and then we'll act accordingly. We'll either be convinced or not.
Again, we're pushing on this 300 number, and you only want this for 300 feet. It seems
Well,
like
that's
you've come up with this number by yourself, and I'm hearing it, so.
Well, I got it from the Conservation Commission, and I have to say a number.
No less than 300 feet was their statement.
Okay, well, that's, if that's how, I could rephrase the motion for you, Mr. Chairman, if that makes more sense.
I'm just kind of curious where they got 300 feet from. Does anyone know where their suggestion of that was from?
Their suggestion of that is based on their judgment call, based on their research. There is no one study that gives 300 feet as a magic number, just like there's no one study that gives 500 feet or 100 feet as a magic number. It is a collection of research, insights, and judgments. So I am interested in finding out how our upland review area being 300 feet from the watersheds will impact wetlands.
I think you're phrasing it incorrectly because it's basically.
Well, it's his motion. He can say whatever he wants.
What?
Okay, so
Okay.
it's his motion. He can say whatever the heck he
Whatever.
wants.
I think you're misinterpreting the concepts and the actual definitions of the.
I agree that it's his motion. We should save that for discussion. So any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah, so the motion has been seconded. I would like to discuss.
Yeah, it has been seconded by Dave.
It has been seconded, yeah. So in discussion, I guess my one apprehension is I don't want to appear that I'm against town opinion, but I did see in the article that Gary said you were against 500 feet. Are you more open to 300 feet or,
To clarify, if the science suggested that the upland review area should be 500 feet, well, then maybe that's what this commission should consider. The science that I've seen shows how pollutants can travel up to distances of 1,500 plus feet. The question here is, does extending the regulated area prevent that? No, it's regulating the activity that would prevent that, or prohibiting the activity. In terms of protecting the water quality going into the wetland, we have a number of resources and techniques and methodologies that are implemented. And again, I point to these manuals that the DEEP produced, the ENS manual of 2002 and the stormwater quality manual. That's been the standard. While we do know riparian buffers and vegetative buffers certainly play a huge role in protecting wetlands and watercourses from the adverse impacts of pollution and runoff, particularly non-point source pollution, such as salt, my suggestion is require more buffers. And when applicants come before me and I review these applications, I'm always looking for opportunities to include a buffer, a vegetative buffer of some sort, whether it's 10 feet wide or 25. That's, so I'm not opposed to 500 feet if the science supports it. I don't think anybody would be if the science supported it. I don't know that the science does. I know the science tells us that chemicals and pollutants can travel 15 plus 100 feet, 1,500 feet plus or minus. Well, understanding that, does that mean that an activity, 500 feet away is going to impact the wetland or watercourse? It certainly may not, because it may not have any of those pollutants associated with that activity. So that's what we review. So
and also while we're just
go ahead.
The chair recognizes Mr. Koch. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just while we're discussing, I every motion has to be phrased in specific words, but I think Mr. Gaishel understands that I'm looking for his insights, and I don't think he's going to hide his insights from us just because of the specific wording of my motion.
So I have a question. If Mr. Gaishel does submit his thoughts to us, can't that be used against us, the board, if you go to court?
Certainly.
Of course.
Just like everything anyone's saying here, including the town's attorney. Those are strong, considerable forces against our opinion, yes.
And we know how Gary feels because he said it multiple times in the newspaper.
Again, but well, I have to separate my feelings from my professional judgment.
Also, Mr. Gaishel has specifically said that the watersheds are different.
Geologically, they are, yes.
I think guys, it's important this is sensitive. And I think I want everyone to idealistically remain friends here. And there's a lot of strong opinions and this is tricky stuff. It's tricky stuff. And I think we need this is a tricky way to do it too. I wish we were in a room together.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to sound silly, but this is difficult. There's no question. And I thank you for everyone's patience.
I think we need to vote on. I think you need to vote on Mr. Koch's motion.
And then the attorney gets all serious.
Motion.
All right, so I'll go from the top down. While I'm not opposed to Mr. Gaishel's opinion, I am not in favor of the motion. My vote is nay. Ms. Berger, your vote, please.
I guess I'm going to have to say no.
Mr. Koch, it's your motion. That's a yes.
Yes.
Rosemary, your vote, please.
No.
And Ms. Chantrell, your vote, please.
I'm happy with what's been presented in the evidence so far, so I'm going to say nay.
All right, and Mr. Schmidt, your vote, please.
I would vote yes.
That's one yes. And Mr. Fiminster, your vote, please.
I vote yes.
All right. So we have 2 yeses and
3 yeses.
3 yeses. Sorry, Ted. Sorry, I wasn't trying to do it. 3 yeses and 1, 2, 3, 4 no's. So the motion fails. Majority have it with the no. Where did
He had to go.
Did we lose
It's
somebody?
10:30.
No, he's right there. Don's right there still.
No, Jason Diebel had to go.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Jason had to go. He was giving, oh, that's what he was doing. I thought he was giving us hugs
No, he was saying goodbye.
when I was getting all like gushy and, whatnot. All right, guys. Well, do we have any other comments that anyone has that they'd like to make? We'd like to give the opportunity for further review of these things. I know that's aligns with the concept of getting the hell off the call. I know that's dangerous, but where do we stand on this?
You had one member of your agency requesting more time.
I agree with that. I would like more time to review all of this stuff that came forward tonight and think long and hard about it.
You can continue this matter to the next meeting and not be running up against any time limits.
Phyllis, what do you think?
The next meeting.
I think the next meeting, just like it keeps going. Sorry to say it, but the next meeting. And I'm just going to be, that's me being open with you. The next one, the next.
So what if you take a consensus?
Sorry, that was, with all due
loop?
respect, that was not directed at you at all. I'm sorry. At all.
No. But I just, I want to see it increased. But I just don't think the 500 is practical.
Can we do a straw
Would
poll?
you like to make a motion?
Yeah, can we see who would want it increased by X and could we get agreement for a certain amount? Is there anybody that's against?
Let's remember that the revision sent to Deep was for 500. And that is what's been posted to the town. And the chair does recognize that Mr. Daigle and Mr. Gay shall have their hands up. One moment, please. Let's just be clear that we have made a unanimous vote for 500. That's what we've sent to deep. So I know we can play around with a different number. Mr. Daigle.
I just wanted to remind you that town legal advice was for you to take the time to have everyone review what has been submitted tonight that everyone hasn't reviewed. I would think it'd be in your best interest as an agency and in the town's best interest for you all to take the opportunity to review that material and continue this discussion at your next meeting on how you want to proceed. It's my recommendation.
Understood, Mr. Daigle, and thank you. I suppose, candidly, my fear with that is my own personal fear, not that of the agency, is that holes are often poked in research, and next thing you know, we're talking about it being 100 feet. So just my candid response. Mr. Gaishel, you had something to say?
I was just pointing out Mr. Daigle had his hand up.
Aha, there it is.
I guess if I had to make one comment, Mr. Chairman, I would say that it's not necessarily poking holes in research so much as the commission carrying forth its duty in properly analyzing all the evidence.
And I understand that. I mean, we take that very seriously. And I know, like Mr. Fimminster said, there's lots of new stuff. And I mean, if you go into the works cited, Mr. Fimminster, of that article that I submitted, there are dozens of scientists, not just one, that we can really.
And that's what he's asked for, the opportunity to go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess I've done the research and I'm tempted to make a motion, but out of respect for the 3 commission members who would like to further review all the information.
So wait, who wants to review? Is it Phyllis? Do you want to continue reviewing? Yes.
Sure, yes.
And then Don.
Dave and Don.
Don. Dave.
I just think as a matter of good mental hygiene, we should let this sit for a minute. And especially since Mr. Fimminster wants to read the stuff. Why would we not let him read the stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with that statement completely.
Yeah.
All right, as the chair, I'd like to make a motion that we continue this to our next meeting because it seems that everyone's hesitating and I generally don't do so. But my motion, Sue Spang, is to continue our deliberations until our next regularly scheduled meeting.
I'll second that.
Mr. Schmidt with the second. And by a show of hands, to keep it easy from the top down, all in favor, please put your hand up and keep it up, of postponing and kicking the can, as they say, down the road. I have Phyllis and Ted. It appears that Rosemary does have her hand up now, reluctantly. Kristen Chantrell's hand is up. The second was from Mr. Schmidt, and that is hand he's clapping. And Mr. Fimminster has his hand up. The motion passes unanimously to continue on until next time. Man, we should be really fresh next time, guys. Though let's talk about that. The ayes have it. We've concluded the public hearing. We've poured over some stuff. There's going to be no new evidence. We're not going to have attorneys coming in and making funny comments about what we've said. We're not going to have any statement from Mr. Gaishel, fortunately or unfortunately, Mr. Gaishel. Big hugs intended. But I think next time we should be able to come at this thing pretty strong and have a good conversation. I hope that everyone reviews the stuff that's been put in the record and the things that those things cite. It's all part of the record. So do we have anything else on our agenda?
Yes.
Hey guys, I gotta go.
Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
Don. See you later.
Have a good night, people. I've got 5 hours of sleep.
Thanks, Don. We appreciate your input.
Take care.
I don't think you need me anymore for any of this, Mr. Chairman, do you?
Why not stick around? New business, none. We're moving on. We don't have any new business. Old business, none. Reports, chairman's report. I'm not going to report anything at this time. It would be inappropriate. Inland Wetlands Agent report, administrative permits issued. Mr. Gaishel, can we keep this short?
Yep. I'm actually working on issuing several here. For Esther Pond Road, wants a pool. 49 Spring Rock Road wants a pool. And 53 Spring Rock Road wants a deck. So those will be 3 permits I'll be issuing in probably the next week. In terms of enforcement, regarding the Boston Post Road piece, I told you I was going to reissue the cease and desist order. I still have to do that. The reason I didn't issue it is I had to shove 3 months worth of work into 3 weeks on the plan of development in order to get that to DEP for their review prior to the public hearing that the Planning Commission must hold in September. But that said, I will reissue the order and we will go forward with a show cause hearing at our next regular scheduled meeting. So that's the status of that.
Do you feel the POCD was rushed because of this? Sounds like it.
To some degree, there was a bit of rushing to do. The good news is DEEP is reviewing. They get 65 days. The Board of Selectmen, they get 60 days to review it and conduct their own public hearing if they wish, all before they report back to the Planning Commission with their comments. And in the interim, the subcommittee can continue to meet and possibly make some changes, maybe nothing too substantive, but they could make changes. And again, based on the recommendations that come forward from DEEP or I'll say the Board of Selectmen, those could be substantive changes as well. We could include those. Well, that process was a bit rushed. We got it done and we got it to a point where we can work with the document moving forward and hopefully have it updated and approved by December. That's all I have.
Fair enough. Just kind of, yeah, it's kind of interesting. So when will we have the cease and desist issued?
So that's good because upon the issuance, we have to hold a show cause hearing within 10 days. So I'm going to coordinate that so that it will be Tuesday, will fall at our next regular scheduled meeting. So that would be prior to the regular meeting. So I would anticipate a 6 o'clock show cause hearing.
All right. 6 o'clock prior to the next meeting. Got it. All right. Anything else we need to worry about on here? Any correspondence? No. Just about 6,000 things put in on our record for our hearing. All right. Do I hear a motion to?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion to peace out from Ms. Phyllis Berger and Rosemary Osfeld. All in favor by a show of hands to adjourn, myself, everybody, boom, 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 boom. We got a thumbs up, there we go. All members are in favor. Take care, guys. It was a pleasure doing business with you, and let's do it again sometime soon.